Actually sounded kind of cool. It sounds like the Dragon Guard soundtrack. Gotta get some intro music and animations and stuff queued up. That's my goal for the next month or so. Is to give the stream a bit of a makeover. Get some animated title cards in. Some scene transition stuff. It'd be nice. The AI stuff looks okay, but it'd be nice to have something that's animated, better text, and commission an artist rather than just using the stock stuff. Oh, here we go. Transition over to the scene. Scene looks good. Audio feedback looks okay. Good. Hi, Saria. How you doing? I really appreciate the fact that you're so punctual all the time. No pressure, of course, but yeah, it definitely means it's like more motivation if my streamers are showing up or my chat is showing up before I do. I definitely don't want to be late, right? But yeah, it's really cool. I appreciate you stopping by. Hope you're doing okay. Sounds like you're doing well. That's good to hear. How's the horses doing? Hope everything's peaceful on the farm. I'm doing okay. Not a huge fan of the summer weather. I do like the fact that it's easier to spend time outside and my dog likes it. And so on the one hand, you know, finding more excuses to spend time away from the screen and exploring, going to new parks and stuff like that, going on hikes, getting more exercise, that's all positive. But I think there's like, I'm going to whine for a little bit here, but there's like, most of the winter I'm uncomfortable because I'm wearing like too heavy jackets and shit like that. Most of the summer I'm uncomfortable because of the heat and the humidity, but there's like a month in the fall and a month in the spring where everything is absolutely perfect. And I spend the rest of the year complaining. See, it's really not bad at all. This is a very nice climate that I live in. It's just, I haven't been touching grass enough, so my body needs to acclimate to the natural sunlight again after too many months in my cave inside, I guess. Sorry, it says I enjoy your stuff. Oh yeah, thank you very much. It really does mean a lot. And I'm glad. I didn't really. I still don't have a specific goal in mind with my streams. I just kind of started streaming because, I've been working on some video ideas, but when I worked on the Itachi versus Pain video, which I'm still like quite proud of and still glad I did, it was 3 or 4 months or however long it took of basically just like isolation in terms of the way I worked on it, because I didn't want my ideas to be like, I didn't want to watch a whole bunch of other people's videos on the subject and wind up, copying their ideas, whether through cryptomnesia or whether through just like, it just sort of gets in your head and it's hard to get out, right? So I really wanted to kind of create in a vacuum, so I didn't really talk to people on Discord or on live much, and it was really kind of isolating, honestly. And I'm prepared to do that again for whatever videos that I might work on next, but I really want to just like have a conversation with people about this stuff. And both the parrot versus swag video and the noodles versus swag video on the Naruto stuff, both of them are like my weird way of trying to participate in a parasocial conversation that I guess like can't really participate in because it concluded years ago, right? But the ideas are still out there and they're still like part of this stream or a thread, and so I was like trying to add to that. So I guess the goal really that I have is to just be able to occasionally connect with and talk to people about stuff that we all like together, and maybe like share ideas. And that's been happening consistently over the course of the past few months because like folks like yourself and Aloha and Auhart and Kakazu and Holidays and Kona and everybody else whose names that I'm forgetting at the moment, all the wonderful folks who have stopped by and who have participated in these discussions have really just made it like super awesome. I don't want to ever I don't want like statements of gratitude like that to ever come with a ... so you better keep fucking watching me or else I'll cry or be upset or anything like that. Okay, there's never any obligation. I hope that's clear, but I am very grateful for it, and it has been genuinely something that I look forward to every week, so thank you. I was going to ask you, Saria, if you'd like me, so I don't know if you're familiar with the YouTuber Skill Up. They're a excuse me, their video game review channel. I pretty much stopped watching stuff from like GameSpot and IGN, and really, there's only a couple like game reviewers that I watch, but everybody has been waiting for Skill Up. Or sorry, Skill Up. I really enjoy their content. Their reviews I don't always agree with, but they're always fair. They're always like done with a nice kind of overall emotional tone, so to speak. They're well scripted. They're well balanced and all that stuff. And they also do a weekly thing called This Week in Video Games, where they do like a roundup of all of the recent news and events and controversies and stuff and releases. They always take time to highlight indie games and also to mention things that are available for free. And people have been clamoring for them to do a review of Clair Obscur, and and sorry for the French pronunciation, but I think after a month or so, it's finally coming out this weekend. So I wanted to recommend that to you. I think that I'm probably not going to listen to it, because as much as I love them, I want to kind of go in with no expectations. It was already sort of spoiled for me, or maybe, I don't think you mentioned it to me, but maybe you did. Maybe it was somebody in Sage's server. They, like I heard, oh no, it was on Zero Punctuation, on Fully Ramblematic rather. Yahtzee, like, I caught a second of his review, and he described what an expedition actually is, or what the premise is, and the number 33, and I was like, oh shit, that's so cool, I wish I didn't know that. Okay, and then I turned it off, and so like when I start playing it, I'm gonna go in totally blind. There's only a few games like Outer Wilds, I somehow managed to not get spoiled for that game. I have no idea how I pulled that off, because I played it like 4 years late, or maybe even longer. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. All the screenshots that I've seen, all of the things that I've heard people say about it, really sound awesome. So I think, I'm not sure exactly when I'm going to start. I think probably, like, I have 2 or 3 more Naruto streams that I want to do on like relevant topics, and then I'm not sure, like I can definitely keep going with the Naruto streams and like just keep reviewing fights and stuff like that. I could also use the weekend time to do more analysis on like the Dark Souls 2 review stuff, and then do gameplay earlier during the week. So I'm still kind of figuring it out. I want to make sure that I give people stuff that they're interested in and I don't let anything slip, but also that I keep having fun with it and that I kind of spread things out. So mulling it over, but just so you know, it's definitely something I want to get into soon, and I'm planning on starting to play it on stream specifically. Sorry, says, oh, don't even worry, knowing about what the expeditions are won't change anything. That's not even a fraction of the story. Oh, okay, good. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't feel like anything's been ruined for me, per se. I just, like, that would have been an additional cool thing to discover. But it's cool to know that that's not like the end of the world or anything like that. But at any rate, so let me describe very briefly what the focus of this particular stream is. So, as you know, we've been playing through Dark Souls 2, and I have some pretty strong opinions about it. I came out of our recent playthrough, which we concluded a few weeks ago, basically feeling like the game overall is very strong, both on an emotional level, on a thematic level, a design level, acoustic level, however you want to break it down. But it does have some significant technical limitations. It does feel like they kind of overstep their bounds isn't exactly the right phrase I'm looking for. That has a different connotation. But like they bit off more than they can chew. That's what I'm looking for, right? They tried to do some things that were pretty expansive and ambitious, and in the process, maybe there were some areas of the game that weren't as polished or weren't as complete as we might have liked to have seen. But in my opinion, just for the record, I think that is also true of games all the way up to and including Night Rain and Shadow of the Erdtree. I think that Fromsoft tends to aim, rather than aiming like a little short to play it safe, they tend to aim a little too far at times, in terms of being able to actually meet their scope and like ship everything with the same kind of level of polish. But those risk-taking endeavors, those willingness to try to experiment and expand and take those risks, I think is necessary for them to find the amazing stuff that they do find. So I don't think it really detracts from the game all that much. That being said, this particular review, Dark Souls 2 Critique by Matthewmatosis, which is now 11 years old now, came out April 20th, 2014. This was a review that came out pretty soon after the release of the game, and it brought up what I consider to be pretty fair critique overall. And at the time, especially, I respected it because everybody else was singing the game's praises, and even though I was a huge fan of the game and still am, I liked the fact that it was taking a bit of a contrarian stance. Hey, Red Muhammad, how's it going? How's your evening going? Hope you're doing well. Everything's going okay over here. We're just kind of getting set up for the stream. We're talking a little bit about Dark Souls 2. I was just mentioning that this review by Matthewmatosis from a few years ago was something that I found kind of inspiring in its own way, because at the time I felt, kind of like I was the one guy who actually understood video games, man. Like, everybody else was heaping praise on all these other games coming out at the time, like the Call of Duties and whatnot, but I was the one who saw through all the bullshit, man. Like, I really understood it. The reason I'm putting on a little bit of a voice, little persona there, is because I do think I was pretty good at analyzing and understanding games, but I think I also, for whatever reason, saw myself as a bit of an outcast, and I saw myself as a bit of like a, what can I say? Somebody who, like, I thought I understood everything on like a deeper level than everybody else, I guess, because I was capable, I thought, of picking out the flaws and the bugs and the problems in games. So I wasn't very good at like explaining to you what the particular like art style of this painting in the game was and what it might represent and how it could communicate something about the character that it was painted of. But I could tell you, hey, there's a glitch over there in that corner, and this character's like animation is broken, and like this audio is stuttering, therefore it's bad, right? So I think Matthewmatosis kind of helped me bridge the gap a little bit, because I think his overall perspective is a little bit overly nitpicky. It's a little bit too literal, sometimes misses the forest for the trees, as I was doing at the same time. But also his channel overall contains a lot of really interesting insight and analysis about video games. So this review, as a time capsule of like Dark Souls 2 discussion in general, is really valuable. And even though I'm about to disagree with like everything he says, I think it's a very interesting starting point, because it represents the perspective of the Souls series at the time. It represents something about what the community was thinking at the time, and it's something that people still quote and reference today. It's considered kind of like a staple of the community in a way. Like, if you just scroll down, I think, yeah, the top comment over here with 4.5k likes is, now if only someone on YouTube could make a video critiquing your critique so that a different YouTuber could critique their critique of you in a 7-hour-long series, right? This is the first one. This is the OG. This is the original Dark Souls 2 critique. And so to kind of cap off our discussion of the game, I want to go back and listen to some of the original arguments, review them, and see if we agree. I personally, like, listened to this a couple of times recently, pretty much disagreed with like 99% of what he said. But this isn't like a takedown, this isn't a debunking, as much as it is like a let's just go back and see like how the discourse has changed. Although I am gonna get mad sometimes. I'm gonna let myself get a little mad here and there, but it's all in good fun, right? I'm not like actually mad. Let me catch up on chat a little bit. Red Muhammad asks, what happened to the Naruto video? Oh yeah, so we're still doing the Naruto stuff. I am the schedule, so to speak, is that on Thursdays I usually do video game stuff. I've been doing Dark Souls 2 for a while, and then we did Night Rain more recently, as well as a little bit of Helldivers. On the weekends, I'm going to be doing Naruto stuff for a while as well. This coming Sunday, the focus is going to be, I'm taking a step back from the pain fight really quickly to talk about some debate-related stuff. If you're not familiar with the YouTuber Noodles, he basically is a debater in the Naruto community, and he's recently brought up some arguments about skepticism and stuff like that I feel like I want to talk about, and just kind of do like a discussion overall of how people talking about Naruto, if that makes any sense. And then the week after that, we'll go back to talking about the Pain versus Naruto fight. If you're asking, I see Saria's comments. If you're asking about like where the video is, so on my channel, let me just go to my channel real quick. For whatever reason, YouTube separates the various videos into like videos and live. So if you just go to my channel and click on videos, you're only going to see these two. You have to go to the live tab and click here, and then you'll see all the other stuff. Basically for the Dark Souls stuff, for the Naruto stuff, and you can kind of browse through here. It looks like the last week's one is still up, so it's still there. I could make some better playlists. There are some playlists here that go over like all the Naruto stuff versus all of the Elden Ring or Dark Souls 2 stuff. So I could probably make some some better playlists here to make it easier. But yeah, let me know if you're seeing it. If you're not, I can take a look and see what's going on. But yeah, so that's the schedule, and that will be where the video is. I hope that's helpful. Matthewmatosis, Samuel Symbiosis. That's got to be his son, right? The sequel to Matthewmatosis is Samuel Symbiosis. Or Symbiosis. You know, it's probably closer to symbiosis or symbiosis or something like that. I worked in a psych research lab for a little while, and the the person who worked there, who was in charge of the lab, always used to say stimuli instead of stimuli. And I think, like, knowing a little bit of Latin and Italian, I think she's much closer to the correct pronunciation. But I guess that was just my bias, right? It's still to this day, I can't hear somebody say stimuli and be like, like not cringe a little bit. It just goes to show you how, like, how deep those, like, sonic biases go, like acoustic biases. Okay, so this is going to be slightly similar to the Noodles response videos that we've done before. I'm just going to play the video. I'm going to stop it as I go. You know what? I am going to go ahead and throw Matthew a subscribe. I encourage you to do so as well. He's got some great videos going over stuff like Tetris and Steven Sausage Roll and The Last of Us 2 and just all kinds of different video game critiques. He actually has a bunch of stuff on the Zelda series, I believe. I think he has like a review of Skyward Sword, and yeah, so sorry, you might want to check him out. I don't remember whether or not I agreed with his reviews, but on the Zelda series specifically, but I did really like his video on he basically has a video describing how he thinks Tetris is a quote-unquote perfect game, and I won't spoil it for you, but I actually kind of wound up agreeing with him. And so yeah, so I have mixed feelings about this channel. I really kind of dislike this video, but I see its value, and I see the value of the channel. So please, as always, go see the video in context, go throw him a like and a subscribe if you like what he makes, and yeah, feel free to interrupt or ask any questions at any given point. I'm just going to kind of start playing it and react and stop as we go. YouTube, John is live, me who's already in the chat. Yeah, exactly. You actually, you're like the living, I was going to say, it doesn't actually sound right. I was going to say you're like the living notification bell, right? Like you kick YouTube's ass and get it to turn on and remind everybody else that I'm about to stream. Yeah, I do very much appreciate that. So, yeah, here we go.
Dark Souls 2 released recently, and being a big fan of the series, I couldn't help but jump in straight away rather than wait for the PC release. I've been playing for a while now and hoping that the game would grow on me more than it did initially, but unfortunately I've found it to be a pretty disappointing experience.
So that's fair, right? Like, he's starting off by saying, hey, I do actually genuinely appreciate this, and compared to other games out there, I see the value in it, but I'm disappointed, right? And that's a fair reaction.
Before I go any further though, I want to explain where I'm coming from. I've been playing the Souls games since not long after the launch of Demon Souls. From there I grew to love the game and love Dark Souls even more once it came out.
Not to be gatekeepy or anything, I don't think you need to have played any of the previous games to have an opinion or an informed or valid opinion about Dark Souls 2. I don't think you need to have played Dark Souls 1 to do a review and analysis and critique of Elden Ring. But it is very useful, I think, to know where people are coming from, how much experience they have, because it's useful data, right? Like, if people who are long-term fans of the series consistently dislike Dark Souls 2, but people who are new to the series consistently like it, well, that's really interesting, isn't it? So I think it's good that he's mentioned that.
The important thing is I played all three games the same way the first time through. I always played a knight, never summoned for any co-op, and never looked up a guide for anything until I completed my first playthrough.
Sure.
After my first playthrough, I would then go back in and explore the games further with different characters. In other words, I'm judging all three games from the same baseline experience.
So again, that's never required, but it is interesting that he's kind of giving us this, okay, like assuming we take him at his word, which I think we should, right? He is saying my data set here, my the way that I approached this analysis was to approach all these games that I'm comparing from essentially the same even playing field, and then once I'd done my initial pass, I would go and experiment and then see what more the game has to offer. So that's great. He is, I don't know if he intended to review the game like professionally, so to speak, before he started playing, but at the same time, it is definitely very useful to have the perspective of somebody who has had this sort of like consistent experience, but then also somebody who's clearly willing to put in the effort and experiment and try different things. That was one of my major critiques of some of the more recent, like Dark Souls 2 critiques, like my counter critique, so to speak, is that their build variety was really lacking, and I didn't think that they were doing a whole lot of creative problem solving with the way that they were approaching engaging with the game. So this is great. There's a lot of really important context.
I also want to say, before I start talking at length about why I found Dark Souls 2 disappointing, that it's still a pretty good game. I'm being totally genuine when I say I would much rather play Dark Souls 2 than most games that have released in the past few years.
Yeah, totally fair.
But I also can't seem to overcome this feeling of disappointment.
Okay. And I've had strong visceral reactions to media like that before, and then kind of felt like, shit, why do I feel this way? Like, where is this coming from? And the process of figuring out why I had that visceral reaction and then asking myself, like, whether or not it was quote unquote justified was really a positive experience. So I think this is great.
All that said, let's start at the beginning. The first major problem with Dark Souls 2 happens less than a minute into the introduction. Rather than being booted directly into the character creation screen like the previous games, this one waits until after an opening sequence before asking you to make your character.
So, actually, let's keep listening to him. I want to keep this in the back of my head, this idea about the other games open with a character creation screen, whereas this game opens with a cutscene first and foremost. I think that by the time we get to Dark Souls 3, we actually see the intro cutscene first and then get to the character creator, but Dark Souls 2 definitely has this, well, I guess you can argue that in Demon Souls as well, you have like an attract video. I think he mentions that. So I don't have much to say about it right now, but I think there's some nuance that we'll need to keep in mind coming up. So let's just keep going.
This means the character's identity has to be hidden by their clothing until that point, but they do a really poor job of this since the character's build obviously looks male. Once you arrive at things betwixt, you can even take your clothes off and confirm it. Not only that, but there's an utterly pointless flashback sequence which also indicates the character is a guy as well.
Okay, so yeah, I have mixed feelings about this. He's going to go on to say, and we'll resume in just a second, that he's concerned that this might feel alienating towards female players. You start the game playing as a male character rather than, and then you can change him to a female character if you wish, or vice versa. Well, sorry, let me clarify. You start the game as a male archetype, and then you can choose to have your character be a female character, and then if you want to reverse that decision, you can go in that coffin and things betwixt and then change your gender again. So I think I'm going to use the term sex and gender interchangeably here for simplicity. I know they're not like the same thing, but just to so I don't stumble over my words a whole bunch, but like, yeah. So your character here coming into this space, I think he's concerned that female players will feel alienated by the fact that they have to play as a male character for a moment. And I personally don't agree with that. I don't see why that would be alienating, especially since you can change that fact a moment later, or change your gender a moment later. But obviously I'm not a female player, so I would be curious to hear from the larger community whether or not that holds up. However, the way that I would approach this, and what I disagree with him here on, is the fact that he doesn't seem to be curious as to why this decision was made, right? Like, he says in previous games, you would get your character creator first and then go into the game, and then that is not the case here. And it seems to be a problem, seems to be being presented as a mistake. And he also mentions this entirely pointless introductory cutscene that also seems to make your character out to be a male as well. And this is where, like, pretty early on, but this is where I start to wonder why we're not asking more questions. Why are we assuming, or at least taking the stance, that this is somehow a bad thing, that you start off as a male character who has a bad backstory? If it's the idea that you want players to have as much expression as possible, okay, well, that I think would be a fair critique. But this idea that the cutscene has no point keeps sticking in my head. It keeps, like, repeating in my head, so to speak. And I want us to try to approach the rest of the review by looking for opportunities to ask more questions, where instead of simply like pointing things out and then playing spot the difference, if that makes sense. Saria says, but you can't change form mid. I'm using this phrasing because Fire Emblem used it, and I was like, that's kind of genius. Oh yeah, mid game. Yeah, you can, absolutely. At any point in the game, you can get back in that coffin and you can change your sex/gender. Just assuming that both of them change at the same time, right? So yeah, let's just keep going. I know that was a bit of a word salad. It'll make more sense as we get into more of what he's saying, but I wanted to at least start planting the seeds for what we're going to talk about soon.
Only that, but there's an utterly pointless flashback sequence which also indicates the character is a guy as well. You could maybe pass this off by saying it's not a flashback of the player character, but in that case it has no reason to exist.
So right there, no reason to exist. That to me seems like completely arbitrary. The game developers wanted to display a cutscene. That cutscene does have contents in it. There is something happening in that cutscene. I don't think it's fair or relevant to say that it has no reason to exist. That to me seems like completely out of pocket. Instead, I think we should try to start with a neutral position and ask what is going on in the cutscene and why was it presented. Could we at least allow for the possibility that the developers did have something that they wanted to convey, and then see where that takes us? And it turns out that when we see that scene before of this female character with a baby, and the character seems to start to melt away, and you have the text that says you will lose everything. I believe this was intended to be part of a narrative about the character, like, if I remember correctly, this is supposed to be your character, the baby's supposed to be your character, and this is supposed to be your mother, and it's something along the lines of your character's memories of your family and your past are melting away. And this ties into the overall larger narrative in Dark Souls 2 of characters losing their identity, losing their purpose. It's not like they're losing all their souls, losing all their money or whatever. It's that their very sense of being is getting eroded and corroded away by the curse. So now your character's left with an interesting paradox. Think about the following thought experiment, right? Imagine, think of the thing that you want the most in the world that you don't have, that you would do pretty much anything, if not literally anything, to achieve. And then you're told, okay, you can have this thing, but the cost of having this thing is that you have to completely wipe your memory and lose your entire personality. But the new version of you, the new blank slate version of you, will have the thing you want. So let's say you were deeply in love with somebody and they didn't love you back and you broke up or whatever, and a genie granted you this wish. Okay, you will be together and you will be happy in a perfect union. Everything will be beautiful and wonderful, but you will lose every bit of yourself that you are now. Would you take that bargain? Would you consider that to be a victory condition for yourself? I personally wouldn't. I would consider that basically death, right? If I lose every single part of me, I lose my version of myself, my consciousness. That's a form of death as far as I'm concerned. And I think that's a theme that the game tries to explore. So saying that this cutscene has no reason to exist is honestly just kind of rude. And I think it also negates, it robs Matthew of the opportunity to try to put this cutscene into the overall narrative context. Hopefully that sounds fair. Let's see. Saria says, this kind of reminds me of how people say Twilight Princess's opening is bad because it's slow, but it's why is it bad to have Link living his life in Village before we start? It immerses us. Yes, okay, so the opening of Twilight Princess and the opening of Nier Gestalt and Nier Replicant are very, very similar, and that you're living in kind of a situation that's removed from the conflict and chaos. You're living in normal life, and basically the first hour or so, especially of Nier, which I know better, is kind of boring and tedious, and you're going out and doing shitty fetch quests. Your first quest is literally go kill 10 boars in a field and bring them back, and then go collect 10 rocks or whatever it is, something like that, right? The idea is that you have to you're starting off as just some kind of a bum and then becoming a hero. And rather than simply telling you that that was the case, you start off with a tunic and the master sword, and then you're told, oh yeah, like you used to be an asshole, but now you're the chosen one, right? Instead, they make you the asshole first. Not that being on a farm is an asshole. I'm talking about like the father in Nier Automata / Nier Gestalt has a bit of a rough past, I suppose you could say. So yeah, they make you kind of like work your way up the ladder, and then when you get there, it feels more satisfying, which ironically is like a very Dark Soulsy thing to do. It puts you in I mean, you always start off as like, a gross like piece of beef jerky in a cell on a mountain somewhere or something like that, right? Like, and you have to kind of work your way up to godhood. I think it's a very important part of the experience for sure. I just want to be very, very clear there that I don't think Link living on a farm and raising horses makes him an asshole for very obvious reasons. That's not my implication, right? It's because he shouts at sheep.
Off by saying it's not a flashback of the player character, but in that case it has no reason to exist. It feels tonally out of place in the Souls series, which has always left the player character's history up to players themselves, and completely conflicts with any female characters.
Well, yes and no. It's not like your character is a total blank slate in the various games. Like, your characters all start with, like, apart from Deprived, your characters always start with armor sets and weapon sets and sometimes spells and sometimes consumable items, and you can also choose a gift. And so while there is a little bit of, I mean, there's plenty of customization, right? Like, you can pick a knight set, like a knight outfit set that looks like it should be coming from the land of Astora, but then make your character look like they come from the land of Karim or something like that. Or there aren't these like fixed archetypes like we have in Night Rain, for example. There's more customization and flexibility. But if you actually do go through the character creator, especially, in Dark Souls 1 and 3, I know for a fact, I don't know about Dark Souls 2, but if you go in and look at the different eye color options, for example, the preset eye colors all have like stories behind them. The hair colors have stories behind them. Like, there's a pink hair color preset, I think, or something like that, which is like rare color from the far off land, or the long dark black hair is like land associated with the or hair associated with the land of the samurai. I forget what they call it in Dark Souls 1, like of the eastern provinces or something like that, right? So there is actually a lot of storytelling that comes baked in with your character. Then you have the option to tweak it. But I think what we're being told here, the story that we're being told here, is that your character at the beginning of the game was actually a specific person with a specific past. And then when you wind up in Drangleic, none of that matters. All of that's been taken away from you. You are a completely different person. So now you have to walk with this paradox for the rest of the game. Your character came to Drangleic for a specific reason, to cure the curse or whatever else they were pursuing, just like Lucatiel, just like Benhart, just like Moglin, anybody else. But you as a player have now taken over. It's your identity, it's your personality, it's your choices that have now completely overridden this empty shell of a person. And your desires as a player start to completely take over the identity of this poor person who just wanted to have his soul eroded, or soul anti-eroded, fixed. That's what I was looking for. So maybe that analysis that I just came up with now, that interpretation is totally bogus. I don't know. Maybe it would get shot down by the community. I'm not sure. I haven't looked into the lore in a little while. But I think if you allow for the possibility of those things, and you, how can I say? I guess if I had a chance to talk to Matthew while he was making this video, I would say something along the lines of, try to ask fewer rhetorical questions. Like, instead of saying, there's no reason for this to exist, ask, what reason could there be for this to exist, if that makes sense? And then try to actually answer that question. I think the game becomes much more interesting if you're open to seeing it in a different light like that.
Normally, I'd be the first person to argue that a game can benefit greatly from giving the main character a defined gender, even if only because of the amount of hassle that can be saved from not having to implement interchangeable pronouns or voice dialogue.
Yeah, I will say that it's something that kind of got memed on a little while ago. Like, I forget if it was the team making Battlefield or something, got some criticism Actually, quite a few game companies got some criticism who were, um, basically only producing video games with male protagonists, especially with multiplayer modes. And then, yeah, so it might have been Battlefield with multiplayer modes and stuff like that. And they were like, somebody was interviewed about it, and he said, yeah, it's actually kind of a huge hassle to make, if we're starting off with male character models, to make female character models and animations and rigs and all that stuff. It's like not literally doubling the work, but it's a huge amount of work, and we just usually don't have the time or the budget for that. And at the time, there was a certain voice in the community, like myself included, that was like, well, then just shut up and make the time. Like, just do it, because like female characters are vastly underrepresented. Somebody has to solve this problem. So, shut up and stop whining, and you basically just solve the problem. And I still kind of like, obviously, I think that we should continue to have more representation of female characters and a variety of different genders and gender expressions in games going forward. And also, it's true. It is true that it is really hard, much harder than I think people sometimes give the animation team credit for, because you have to, like, female bodies and male bodies don't tend to move quite the same way. The proportions are different. They're like body. I mean, like, I'm not going to give y'all a biology lesson here, but there are noticeable difference. I'm not talking about just like waist, like width or something like that, right? I'm talking or like muscular structure. I'm talking about the way that people run, the way that people lean into their runs and transition out of running, like their stature, and the implications that has for like hitboxes and multiplayer. All the little things that you don't tend to think of as a like casual player. It is more work, and sometimes it can be a lot more work. Now, I still think that it can be overblown. It's not. It is simultaneously more work than people think, but also less than some of the sort of doom-mongering people mention. It's entirely possible to do, but it does require that you have a production / marketing / money-giving team that are like willing to give a shit and support you in doing so. And that's the hard part. It's not that hard to convince a game designer or a director even to on at least today, to add in another like character model archetype or something, especially in a multiplayer game. What is hard is to then go to some jaded, cynical asshole producer. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to call out like all producers or all marketing folks or anything like that. But like at a certain point, you will hit a brick wall at the top of the ladder. And that brick wall is something that you want to get money out of. And you have to explain to them why gender representation is good for society. And if they're not inclined to agree with you on that in principle, then it might be harder for you to, like, your only other recourse is to do some marketing research and say, if we include female characters in this game, here is mathematical proof that we'll make more money in return, right? Usually appealing on an ethical stance is not going to, in and of itself, get you the money you need to make ethical progress. You need to actually demonstrate how that will benefit them financially as well. So anyway, yeah, biology with John the Professor Maven. Well, you see, the female hips, the hips of a female is different from the and the pectorialises of the masculine male is more masculine than those of the feminine female. That's the extent of my biology lesson. And my science teacher in high school said I never amount to anything. Look at me proving him wrong. But yeah. So basically, I want to try and look at the nuanced position here.
Story-driven games usually benefit much more by focusing on other details, so it's unreasonable to expect every game to cater to both sexes in this way.
Just to be contrarian, I will say that having a male and a female variant of a protagonist in something like the masculine father-bearing hips, having, God damn it. I was watching like Oni Plays or something like that, and they kept referring to a woman as having, the expression is childbearing hips, right? Like wide hips that I guess are better for more comfortable birth or something. But they kept referring it to the woman as having mother-bearing hips, rather than saying like a motherly childbearing hips or something like that. So now I just have this, sometimes when I see a lady with a broad stance, I think of it's just like that's like, yeah, that that lady could bear a good mother. It's very, very silly. Anyway. Masculine hips are underrated, but we'll talk about that on a different stream. Anyway, just to be contrarian with all this shit. Yes, exactly. These hips are for outputting fully formed, ready to go entire ass mothers. Sounds like sci-fi dystopian shit. But yeah, I will say that, like, sometimes it can actually make a huge difference and be really, really good. I would like to read an interview and just understand, not a rhetorical question, why did the folks at BioWare decide to go with give the player the option to choose between a male and a female Commander Shepard, right? Because I always thought that it added a lot, and it just gives players options. It gives you more expression. I think it has some slight changes on which characters you can romance and stuff like that, so it impacts the story. It's a story-driven game, but it allows for that possibility, and I imagine it must have been hard for them to justify at the time. I imagine that somebody in production must have been like, well, wouldn't we just save, like, literally $10 million or more even if we just only have a male character, or even only a female character as your playable character? But then when you get to something like Larian, like, obviously this is way later, but great RPGs often let you choose any number of different, like, visual presentations and voices. They have, like, different voice packs and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know. I really would like to hear, like, I can opine about this, but I would like to hear more developers talk about why they made those decisions.
But the Souls games had been doing fine at this up until now. In any game where I can choose a gender, I always play as a guy, but even so, this introduction was so pointlessly botched that I couldn't help but think how alienated I'd feel if I wanted to play as a girl.
I mean, I just don't understand where he's coming from. Like, I just can't relate to this at all, because you do literally get to play as a girl, like, right after this. I'd love to hear from the greater community, like, hey, if you're a lady and you played this game, did you feel alienated for, like, the 10 minutes that you played as a shambling corpse before you chose your own gender? Did you feel like being a man for a moment somehow ruined the experience? I also think that the description of this as being pointlessly botched is really harsh. I mean, if you think the opening is clunky, or you don't really understand or appreciate the choices that were made, you wish it were the way that it was previously, and you think it was more elegant or something like that, that's fine. But saying that the whole fucking opening is botched because of this choice, that seems pretty excessive to me.
This whole thing feels like they went to the trouble of creating an FMV trailer and then had to find some way to retrofit it onto the game itself.
I know he said seems like, but I also, that seems to be like slightly cozying up towards assuming developer intention, and I would be pretty wary of that. I mean, I don't think it's fair to the developers to just assume that they decided to make a cool trailer and then didn't know what to do with it and then put it on the game and that it doesn't fit or something like that. Although there might actually be some validity to that, because apparently the game was supposed to be more of a focused traditional story, like we talked about that before, like a romance, like a love story, something like that. And it might have been something closer to Sekiro, where your character has a specific identity and then that got changed. So, I mean, it's possible that the FMV that they generated was not fully representative of the game that they wound up shipping. But I think you just got to be kind of careful of stuff like that. I'm also just kind of noticing here that you can kind of see like a golden sparkle in this character's eyes, so that's kind of curious, right?
After choosing a character, the old ladies then say,
"You lose your..."
Saria says, I didn't feel alienated. I honestly didn't care, because, I mean, until Elden Ring, my characters are always very unappealing. That's fair. Did you just go with, like, the preset characters? That's usually what I do. I don't tend to spend much time in the character creator I just kind of want to get right into the game.
Your souls. All of them. Over and over again.
You can practically hear the developers laughing at your expense as she says this. They're basically saying, we made this game really hard. That's what you wanted, right? Now,
I mean, like, again, it's possible. It's possible that that's the case. And I understand where he's coming from. I don't think he's being, like, totally unfair with this interpretation. But at the same time, it is kind of, again, assuming intention, right? It's assuming that the developers are having this... I mean, maybe it's not even fair to say it's an assumption, because he is, like, drawing a conclusion. He's not just, like, baselessly asserting it. But I guess what I disagree with here is the idea that... how can I explain this? He's kind of presenting this one interpretation, but not discussing other ways of looking at this. I guess is one way to put it. Like, another take on this is that the characters diegetically in the game world are laughing at you for a specific narrative reason, and the developers put that dialogue in that scene because they wanted to convey that specific narrative to you and get you thinking about it. And yeah, it is kind of coincidental that there's a lot of marketing around the game saying like, oh, Dark Souls Prepare to Die edition or whatever, right? There is some of that stuff in there. You can read into that. Personally, I guess I just disagree with that interpretation. I don't think that's entirely fair. At the very least, I think that he's missing out on what is, like, if you just take a second and try to evaluate the game diegetically, like what is actually happening in front of you inside the game world. Those characters in the game world don't know shit about what's going on the outside, right? So can we at least try to figure out if there's an in-universe explanation for why they're acting that way? And if there literally isn't, if it is just a fourth wall break, then okay. But it doesn't feel to me like that effort has been put in here. It seems like a knee-jerk, like, oh, right, this must be in response to the game's difficulty, blah, blah, blah. And to me, that feels like a little bit of a thumb at the nose to the developers. Larry says, pretty much, it was similar with Mass Effect. I didn't change anything because I was like, she looks fine, she's okay. Yeah, I felt the same way about Mass Effect. I just went with female Shepard, and I liked her basic archetype, and just kind of went with that. Yep. Weren't people calling Elden Ring the hardest game of all time? I'm sure that some were, yeah. And honestly, like, Malenia, I think I mentioned this before. I'm glad Malenia exists. I think she's a well-designed boss. I wonder now if I went back to her, if I would have as much trouble as I initially did. But it took me 8 hours to beat her, and I was like, I did it in like 2 4-hour sessions, and I was pretty much miserable the entire time. And then when I finally beat her, I didn't feel any sense of satisfaction. I was just like, oh shit, that wasn't even the last boss. The next one's going to be even harder. And recently playing Deltarune, no spoilers, but playing Deltarune, there was a couple of things where I was like, man, I don't want, like, I know I can do this, but it's going to take me like 4 hours. Like, I need to memorize all the attacks. I need to memorize the patterns. I need to just get my reflexes up. And I know that, like, I value the whole, like, you should earn a difficult victory thing. I very much do. But also, like, I've been waiting for 6 fucking years for this game to come out. I just want to see the story. Does that make me a little bitch? Does that make me a little pussy? I don't care. At this point, I don't care. I'm however old I am. I'm however tired I am at the moment. And I just want to sit back and enjoy the story. That's a legitimate way to engage with the game as well. I don't want to run this fucking gauntlet over and over again. And so when I got to the Shadow of the Erdtree, personally, I wasn't really looking for a challenge. Like, I just wanted to experience the lore. I wanted to experience the world. I wanted to experience the characters, which I know difficulty is a part of how they're built fundamentally. I believe in that, and I wouldn't ever ask the developers to change that. But just me personally, where I was in my life, I was like, I summoned for Rolana, and I summoned for Mesmer, and I couldn't even tell you what half of Mesmer's, like, what that boss fight is like, because I wasn't paying attention. I was just so, like, done with it. I'm like, I just want to experience this world. I'm not going to spend 4 hours here on every single boss learning all the different attacks and everything. I just can't do this shit anymore, right? Now, if I was in a better state of mind, when I do want to go back and replay Shadow of the Erdtree and just do it all myself with a simple build. And I think in a better state of mind, I will enjoy it more. But also, like, I don't know. I thought the Erdtree avatar, or what's it called? The Scatter Tree avatar, the giant sunflower thing, was perfect. It was difficult. It was challenging, but it didn't demand that you have like these perfect, like blisteringly fast reflexes and memorize all these super complex patterns or whatever. There were three distinct phases. There was a very obvious weak spot, but one that you had to be careful of, like how you actually engaged with. I felt like it rewarded experimentation and also careful play, and that boss to me was great. Nothing in that DLC needed to be any harder than that. Fucking like Consort Radon. I get that you're fighting a literal god, so I think narratively it's appropriate, but also again, like it took me like 8 hours to fucking beat that thing, and at the end of it I was just like, I need a nap, you know. Like it wasn't, I guess maybe now this is entirely subjective, it's entirely personal, but I guess at this point in my life I'm just like, I've been through this so many times at this point. The whole like being difficult for the sake of like just being an insurmountable challenge that you then throw yourself at over and over again, it's starting to wear thin for me. But who knows? That could just be me personally. It's not necessarily, you know, like, I don't think From Software should change what they're doing. It's just sort of where I'm at. Anyway. Totally not Kavaga. Bonjour. Hey, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. Thank you for stopping by. I can't handle this shit anymore. John the Maven after bursting down the doors to FromSoft SQ. Yes, exactly. Michael Zaki. I demand to speak with Michael Zaki. Why didn't you put the fucking Moonlight Sword in Sekiro, you little asshole? Anyway. But yeah, all this is just to say, regardless of how I personally feel about the difficulty of it, all of that was just me saying, like, I get it. It doesn't feel nice when you think the game developer is fucking laughing at you. Like, I just got done with work. I'm frustrated. I'm tired. I just want to kick back and like turn my brain off and enjoy this beautiful world. I just paid like $60 for this shit, 70, 80 now. Like, this is the only game I can afford this month. And I put it in and the game says, ha, you little bitch, and pushes me down in the mud, steals my lunch money, and then steals my car. It's like, fuck, no, why are you doing this to me, Mr. Zaki? So I get it. I just also think we should be fair to the developers and try to like understand where they're coming from.
Now, it's no secret that Miyazaki, the director of the previous two Souls games, wasn't brought back as the director for Dark Souls 2, but his insight into the previous games can still say a lot about this game. In practically every interview he's ever taken since the release of Demon's Souls, Miyazaki is asked to comment on the difficulty of the Souls games, and the answer that he gives, over and over again, is that difficulty was never the point. The games weren't designed to be challenging just for the sake of it.
I will say, though, this is absolutely true, but I will say, I'll have to track this down, but there's an interview I read with Miyazaki in which he was like trying to explain why he likes making poison swamps, and the person interviewing him was saying, why would you do this to your players? What's wrong with you? And he's like, because these are the games that I want to play. This is what I like. And the guy was like, are you serious? So let me get this straight. Like describing, I think, Blighttown or something like that. You actually enjoy games where your character slows down and like can't move normally and gets poisoned and toxic and like has giant balls of shit thrown at them, and then they die alone in like a dismal swamp in the bottom of the fucking hole. And he's like, yes, I love that. That is my idea of a good time, right? Like, he absolutely adores having these like miserable, like sadist or like masochistic experiences. And so I think he weaves that into his games in sort of a selfish way. I'm not saying that pejoratively, like not that it's bad, but he selfishly creates experiences that he finds emotionally compelling, and masochism is part of that. So yeah, I think Miyazaki does actually want to be called a little bitch and pushed down in the mud by like some bickering old ladies who then run off with all of his souls and steal his torrent. I think that is what Miyazaki wants out of his games, and we don't have to like that, but if he does something like that, I think we should try to understand it and appreciate it. And if his like other members of his team, you know, people in the larger sphere of his company decide to do something similar, then I think they are embodying the spirit of his like weird masochism. And if we didn't have that weird masochism, then we wouldn't have these games. Sorry, it says, why would you do this? This is what I want to play. Bro, what about me? I don't even know who the fuck you are. Yeah, I added in a little editorializing there, but yes, it's like, why are you even here? If you're not here to suffer with me, get the fuck out. He seems so nice though, right? Like the other interviews, the other one that kind of comes up a lot is the passive co-op mode. I think I forget the story. It was like he was in his car and there was a bunch of people who were kind of stuck, and they were trying to get up a hill and they couldn't get up the hill for whatever reason, and so everybody kind of like helped nudge the car up the hill in front of them, and then the person behind them would help nudge them up, etc., etc. It's just like a bucket brigade, like a long chain reaction, right? And none of the people in the cars ever really saw each other's faces or knew who they were, but everybody there just took a moment to help somebody out and participated in this chain of like human kindness, I guess. And he took that and he made that into the passive online multiplayer system where people from other worlds will just come in for a brief time, help you with one thing, and then leave. Right? And that's beautiful. So I don't genuinely think he's a sadist or that his teams are sadists and that they want to mock and scorn the player. I think he loves his players very much, and I think he specifically loves the spirit of collaboration. But that's the thing. The games themselves have to be hard in order to encourage, in order to make, or let me rephrase. If the games are hard and there are also compelling multiplayer systems that are a part of the game, then it incentivizes you to reach out to other people for help. Now, unfortunately, in the West, maybe in the East, I don't know, but in the West, we have this, well, let me just say in America, because that's the culture that I'm most a part of at this point, right? We have this sort of toxic masculinity bullshit of like, if you don't do it yourself without any help, then you suck, right? Then you basically have cheated yourself. You didn't really try, you didn't really struggle. Like in our country, in our culture, we value independence and struggle and strife. Like we all want to be Vikings, like earning our way into Valhalla or whatever the fuck else, right? That's not necessarily the case in other cultures, and there's nothing wrong, genuinely. There's not an excuse, right? This is not me trying to earn permission for this shit. I genuinely believe this. There is nothing less valuable about getting help from someone than there is about just doing it all on your own, right? There are different ways to accomplish a task, and in some situations, having a connection with somebody and working on something together might actually objectively be better by certain metrics. So there's this like cultural thing where we feel like we have to get over everything ourselves, otherwise like we suck. And I don't know, the game itself, what if the series this whole time wasn't telling us that we needed to get stronger and more resilient and like overcome all the adversity? What if the game this entire time was telling us we needed to make friends? Like we needed to team up with people? What if that was like the intended method of play, right? I'm not saying it is necessarily, I'm just saying there's this, like the multiplayer aspect of the game is so fundamentally important and such a big enduring part of the series that the game will give you multiplayer characters to play with even if you're not online. Right? They made sure to put in AI companions that you can use if you can't connect to the internet, right? So anyway, it's all worth considering. Sorry, it says Miyazaki is basically the video game developing Burton of Might Guy. Does it hurt? But it'll help you grow. Yes, the springtime of his development youth is far from over. I can see that. I can see him being like, if I can't beat Radon, I'm gonna do 100 laps around the studio on my hands backwards. That's how he gets stronger. Okay. But no, I think there's nothing I'm gonna say that's gonna be funnier than the image of Miyazaki doing Might Guy training around the office. Well done.
It was a way to pull you into the world, and the peaks and dips in difficulty can be used to effectively set up a climactic moment, like the fight with Ornstein and Smo.
That's true.
It feels to me like difficulty was a big focus in Dark Souls 2, which is a crucial misunderstanding on the part of the new directors of this game, probably helped along with some pushing from Namco, who have enjoyed playing the difficulty card for marketing purposes since before the release of Dark Souls.
I will say that the monument over here that kind of displays the deaths worldwide, it's a little weird because it's might be the oddest thing in the game, just because it I guess it I was gonna say it kind of breaks the fourth wall, but I mean, you could just say that this is something inside the game world itself, so it is diegetic. But then if that's the case, why does there exist this thing to just count how many times people have died in Drangleic overall across all the worlds? I don't know. This definitely seems like a marketing thing. Like, we got to put this in the game so that people know, I don't know, how much death has occurred. But you could also argue that this is a point of empathy, right? Like, when you die, it can feel demoralizing. You can feel like you failed. It can feel like some sort of like minor catastrophe just happened to you. But if you come up here, then you realize that every time somebody dies, you are all kind of helping a number increment, and there's a little part of our like reptile brains that like seeing numbers go up. So in a way, I think you could look at this as something that makes you a part of something. Like, even if you're alone, even if you like are suffering on your own, you can go back to this and be like, oh, okay, well, I was part of this process shared by all these people, right? Totally Not Kavox asked, are you going to make a full-on critique video? I'm not sure. Are you asking about a critique video of Matthewmatosis's video, like basically doing what I'm doing now, but instead of doing a live thing, like doing a full-on response? I'd be open to doing that. I'd also be open to doing a critique of Dark Souls 2 itself, although at this point, I think I kind of said what I wanted to say over the course of the live streams that we did previously. So I'd need to kind of think of an angle for it, like that hasn't been covered before. So for example, I like this is not what you're asking about, I'm sorry, but what I want to do a stream talking about the music in Dark Souls 2 and like how it enhances the storytelling in the game, because that's something that I haven't seen as many folks do, and it's something that I feel pretty passionately about. So I'd want to try to maybe focus on like a specific part of it. It could be like a theme. It could do like the notion of hopelessness in Dark Souls 2, but I don't think I'm prepared to go up against somebody like what's that guy who's been making stuff recently, like Domo 3000, where I go through and look at hitboxes and do a whole lot of different like get footage of different kinds of roll animations to check iframes for adaptability. I would more maybe try to summarize the videos that we've talked about so far, like the streams we've talked about so far, and then talk about like, the current discourse around it, if that makes sense. But I am I just saw your message, yeah. I'm also open to suggestions and open to ideas. If there's something specific you'd like me to look into or talk about, let me know. Yeah, XX Fart Slayer 69 kind of breaks the fourth wall. That is true. That's one of the limitations of the system. And honestly, like when I was trying to get footage and screenshots for making thumbnails and stuff, one of the things that I ran into consistently was I would have to turn off the online mode because of all the goddamn blood stains. And you can even see, so I'm here, right? There's one on the floor over here, and there's a little orange message. I had to play Elden Ring. I was gonna play it online at first, but my first playthrough I went offline because I was so fucking sick and tired of seeing every time I would get to like a place with a statue of Radagon America, somebody would have written a big dumb glowing white sign on their head, and if you read it, it would always say Fort, Night, and like it was fucking everywhere with thousands and thousands of upvotes in every location. I was like, yeah, this is funny. Good job, you made it. Like, it is actually genuinely funny the first maybe 20 times, and then it's like, it does totally break immersion because you're walking into this space that's supposed to be like a holy, venerated cathedral, or like a chapel rather, that's fallen to disrepair, and now there's this old weathered statue of a goddess who's like being tormented, but she's also retaining some of her grace, literally and figuratively. And then there's just a big dumb sign like clipping through her head. It's like, it does kind of break it. So I don't know what the solution to that problem is either, because ultimately the ability to leave messages and to summon people in like that is such an important part of the series. But it does, and it's important for immersion, but it also carries that risk. Like, it's tough. I don't know what the solution is. Either critique of DS2 or Matthewmatosis or Mahler for that matter. Yeah, honestly, it might be nice to do like a misunderstanding Dark Souls 2 summary video and have a section on Matthewmatosis, a section on Mahler, and a section on Feeble King and folks like that. I find it very difficult to listen to Mahler for extended periods of time. His voice makes me like actually kind of queasy to listen to. The way that he just kind of, and this is totally petty, right? This isn't a critique of his positions on anything, but the way that he just kind of like leans into words like what does he keep saying? Like if something is worth something, he won't say this is worth $5. He'll say this is worth $5. Like it's like he's like dry heaving, and I know that's really mean of me actually, and I kind of feel bad for saying that out loud because it's basically me making fun of the way somebody speaks. You could make fun of the way that like my voice cracks and stuff like that. Like I'm very self-conscious about that, honestly. So I'm trying to be empathetic, but the fact is that it's how can I say, it's coupled with so much like genuine scorn and like disgust. It's not that his voice happens to sound that way because that was the vocal timbre he got when he was born or whatever. It's that he's using like this really thick, like viscous kind of vocal tone to layer on top of all of this like angst and like condescension and meanness and like crappiness, I guess. And so yeah, not to voice shame or like anybody, like that's not cool. It's just for whatever reason when I listen to his stuff I get like uncomfortable. I can't listen to him for more than like 10 minutes at a time. So what I need to do is I'll need to go to Domo's videos and I'll need to like watch some of his stuff and then find the Mahler points that I find the most interesting or something like that. Or maybe I can just like suck it up and do it. I watched his one that was like the in defense of Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin. I got through that one, so maybe I can go back and look for something there. I just can't do like the main like 7-hour gauntlet. I can't get through that shit anymore. But yeah, it sucks too. I mentioned this before. It kind of sucks because like I do genuinely want to hear what he has to say, even if I disagree, because he's clearly put a lot of effort into it, and I respect that, and I want to hear what his points are. But also, you know, like I did eventually make it through like the first two, I think, at one point of those 7 videos, and the first one was basically what's his name? Bomber guy, Harris, kept saying, I think this game is fun, it makes me feel like I'm having a good time, and fun, good, like, think are all subjective words, and you can't be subjective when talking about a video game. You definitely can't use the term fun to describe a video game because that's not an objective term. And like, I didn't get anything else out of his critique other than he's upset when other people review video games with subjective terms, which is just honestly something that's probably worth talking about. It's probably worth bringing up. So yeah, thank you for thank you for inspiring this weird little tangent that I went on. But yeah, I could talk about that. I could talk about like objectivity and subjectivity, and I could talk about he did say at one point that the healing system was objectively broken, which is just objectively bullshit, and I think we demonstrated that on stream together at one point. So yeah, I can do it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to like whine. It's just I really tried hard, and it's how can I explain this? Putting your AirPods on, whatever they're called, and just listening to somebody in your in your ears, right up close to you, be super shitty and mean for hours on end. I think it's just like not good for your mental health. I think it's just bad for your brain. And so that's kind of why I had to take a break. But anyway, good idea. I like the idea. I think that I'll consider it, and that could be something that I work on in the future. Thank you for the inspiration. If you need any information about Dark Souls 2, I've got you. I know way too much about this game. Oh yeah, I would actually love to run some ideas by you, especially about like there's stuff about like Alkin and Ven that I don't fully understand yet. I have some speculation about what I think the ancient dragon is, but I'm not sure. And then I haven't engaged with the PvP much at all, so if you have thoughts on, you know, this game has a strong reputation for having great PvP, but I haven't really engaged with it very much, so I'd be curious what your thoughts are on that. And also, if you brought up Mahler, I'd be curious what you think about him. I ranted about him for a little while. Do you have any thoughts? Do you think he has like important stuff to say that I should be listening to? Because if so, I'm happy to give it a shot. Saria says, totally not Kavak, you have been invaded by shoe shine Jason. What does this mean for the lore? Well, there are shoes in Dark Souls. And the letter J appears on at least 3 items. I think you may have stumbled across some of the deepest lore, Saria. And I'm only half joking. I mean, like, you know the saga of the pendant, the broken pendant in Dark Souls 1, right, Saria?
As soon as you get to Majula, there's even a counter tracking the number of deaths. You can also go online and see a full breakdown of the ways people have died. The most obvious way this has been misunderstood, however, is with the boss fights. In Dark Souls 2, I got the impression the developers were asking themselves, how can we make this fight difficult? Whereas the question they should have asked is, how can we make this fight interesting?
And you know what? That is fair. I kind of disagree, but also what he's saying is this is the experience that I had when I went through the game, and I think that's actually valuable. Contrary to Mahler, I really think that it's important when you're listening to a reviewer to hear what their emotional experience was going through the game. That does not necessarily exist at odds with their whatchamacallit. Like the fact that they felt something and that feeling was an emotion and not a logically arrived at conclusion or whatever doesn't invalidate it, right? It's not less important or less relevant because it was a feeling. I want to know how the game made you feel and why, both as a fellow player of the game who likes understanding how other people feel about it, but also as a developer. Like, we don't want to just test our players and make sure that they can input the buttons real good. We want to make them feel shit. We want to make them have emotional experiences and learn things and share things and, yes, have fun, but fun is a feeling too, right? That's what we fucking want to do. So, I don't know. If I want to know how long a game is and, like, how many, what the performance is or whatever, I can look at the back of the box. I can look at the end of the review, the numerical score and the breakdown. When I'm listening to a reviewer, I want to know how that person feels about the game first and foremost. And then I want to understand why, right? So I'm glad that he is saying this. This is actually very valuable. Totally Not Kavak says, do you want my Discord name so you can message me on? Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great. If you're comfortable, you can feel free posting it in chat here. Or my Discord name is the same thing. It's just John the Maven, just one word, no spaces. So you can feel free to send me a friend request, and more than happy to follow up with you there.
A good comparison is the Royal Rat Authority in Sif. The fight with the Royal Rat Authority is much more difficult, but Sif is far more memorable. Difficulty doesn't necessarily equate to a good experience even in a Souls game.
Okay, I would agree with that last part. Something that I didn't even realize the first time that I listened to this review is if you look in the upper left-hand corner, he does have Covenant of Champions active. And if you're not familiar, Covenant of Champions is a covenant that makes the game significantly harder for yourself. Now, I don't know if this was his first playthrough. It looks like he's using a sword and shield, but it's a poison scimitar as opposed to the normal sort of sword and board stuff that he tends to describe. But not to like nitpick or build shame him or anything like that, but it's worth noting that he's using a poisoned scimitar up against a character that is, I believe, toxic, so I don't even know if poison is effective on him. Maybe it is. He's debuffed himself, like heavily debuffed himself by activating this covenant. And if I'm remembering correctly, this armor set is the I can't remember. It's like the Archdrake set or something like that, which is beautiful, but doesn't have a whole lot of defensive capability. So it feels like he has giga nerfed himself going into this fight. And at that point, like, it doesn't mean that it's his fault necessarily, but like we could have a discussion about whether or not the game should have telegraphed this more clearly. But if I remember correctly, to activate this covenant, you have to find the Awe Stone or the Stone of Champions, whatever it's called, Victor Stone, I think. And then it gives you 3 prompts in a row. It's like, do you want to join this covenant? Yes. It's going to make your life like really hard. You still want to join? Yes. No, seriously, dude. Like, I mean, really, really, really hard. Are you fucking sure? You have to press yes 3 times to get into it. So maybe this is like a second or a third playthrough, though. I don't know. But if this is the way that he experienced the game first, then yeah, it's gonna be fucking miserable. And I think the developers did more than their due diligence to try to prevent players from having this experience. I will also say I don't think that the comparison to Sif is relevant at all. I was thinking about this the other day. Yes, the Sif fight is more memorable than the Royal Rat Authority. That's fine. But why are we comparing the Royal Rat Authority to Sif in the first place? Because it's a big dog? Because it's a big dog in, like, I guess an adjacently grave-related area? It's not, like... That's the most, like, superficial comparison to make. The boss, like, thematically and narratively and mechanically doesn't have anything to do with Sif beyond the fact that it was like a large canine, canid or whatever. So I think what's unfortunate here is that Matthew is saying, okay, here is a thing that looks like a big dog. I'm going to compare it to the other thing that looks like a big dog. The other thing is better. But he's not actually... you shouldn't be comparing the Royal Rat Authority of all things to Sif. You should be comparing, like, Velstadt to Sif, right? In terms of the narrative placement of that character, of the overall, like, intricacy of the mechanics, of the character design, all that stuff, Velstadt is a much more analogous fight to Sif than the Rat Authority. The only real comparison here is that they're two big dogs. Hopefully that makes sense. It's a little tricky to explain what I mean, I guess. But yeah, I think we should be comparing bosses that aren't just visually similar, but that are, like, thematically similar, if that makes sense. Saria says, honestly, I think your feelings matter more than anything else because that's the most important thing you can pull from the art, because that's why art is subjective, because we're individuals. Yeah, absolutely. The art itself is, well, I mean, the games themselves are art, and then the way that people interact with it is a conversation between the art and the artist. And video games, in particular, are a weird, unique form of collaborative art that's made by lots of different people with different perspectives, all trying to bring an interactive vision to life. If you can't talk about the way that makes you feel, then what the what the fuck are you talking about? Sent it the friend request. Okay, awesome. Let me just check Discord real quick. I tend to keep it closed because I don't want to get too distracted. But I see pending. I see Kavak. Yes, excellent. Okay, accepted. Yeah, I'll be sure to follow up with you afterwards. Like, feel free to send me a message anytime you like. I can be a little slow to respond because I basically, like, keep this computer. You know, I have, like, a work computer, and then I have, like, a streaming setup, and I have decided not to put Discord on, like, any of my other devices, because if I do, I'm just going to be on there all day. So I usually check, like, once a day. But yeah, I really appreciate you reaching out.
One of the first images that pops into my mind when I think of Dark Souls is a giant, proud-looking wolf wielding an enormous sword while protecting the grave of his master.
And that's totally fine. It's iconic.
The Royal Rat Authority, on the other hand, is a retread of the Sif fight with 4 random enemies which inflict toxin slapped in front of it to make it harder.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I don't see this as a retread of the Sif fight. I don't think this has anything to do with the Sif fight. It doesn't have, like, the same place in the story. It doesn't really have the same sort of narrative context either. The only comparison I see with Sif is the fact that it's a big dog. The inclusion of the 4 rats, I also don't think is random. I think, you know, throughout the level, you run into these guys and you get to understand that they do toxic damage and understand, like, how much damage that is, and you have an opportunity to figure out how to deal with it before you get here. And then the test here is, like, okay, you're going to have a massive burst of damage right up front, followed by a slower, more sustained fight. What are you going to do to solve that combat puzzle? So again, like, Sif is a very straight up, sort of straightforward fight, right? It's a beautiful, it's an elegant, it's a kind of difficult, like, challenging dance between you and Sif. But at the end of the day, like, it's not like Sif, like, has multiple phases where she, like, disappears and goes into the forest and then summons a bunch of trolls to come fight you, or, like, jumps into the air and starts firing lasers. It's not like a Dark Souls 3 or especially an Elden Ring or a Night Rain boss, right? It's a straight up duel. This is not. This is dirty. This is scrappy. This is filthy. This is gross, right? Like, there's this dog, like, halfway through the fight, this Royal Rat Authority starts puking up and retching and spewing like the gaping dragon and just, like, turning the whole arena into this disgusting mess. Totally undignified, totally like pathetic. Nothing to do with Sif. So, I want to pet that dog. Yes, every dog should be pettable. That's the real reason why this game sucks, is that there are no pettable dogs. Anyway, I got stuff to do, says Kavak. See ya, and if you feel like you're bothering me about Dark Souls 2 with a bunch of questions, trust me, you're not. Yeah, totally. I love talking about Dark Souls 2, be it the gameplay or the lore. Yeah, same here, man. I adore this game, and I really enjoy talking about it. I really appreciate you stopping by. I hope you have a great night, and I'll be happy to chat with you more on Discord. Take care.
If you manage to kill the 4 rats, the fight is practically over, but unless you're a pyromancer, it's a crapshoot about whether you'll manage to get them all before the giant one mauls you to death.
I don't know. I think we did just fine in our playthrough without any pyromancy.
Similar problems extend to other boss fights, which seem to follow the mantra, if you can't make it good, make it difficult by adding more stuff. In Demon Souls, the man-eaters were arguably the ultimate spike in difficulty. You got partway through the boss fight and suddenly there was 2 of them. It was a moment designed to induce panic in most players, since they knew their odds of making it out alive just dropped significantly. In total, there was 4 bosses in Demon Souls, which included multiple enemies, the others being very mild in comparison to the man-eaters.
I do like that interpretation. Sure, it's a moment of panic, it's a moment of dread. It's also like it's timed very well in the fight where, you know, it doesn't start you off with 2 of them. It gives you an opportunity to make some progress during the fight, which sets a certain emotional tone, and then it subverts that, and then it's like, okay, now what are you going to do about the situation? And then the nature of the fight changes too. Like, you can take cover behind that brazier like he was doing. You can decide to just go, I think you can decide to go for the one that is already low on health and try to just burst it down. It's a really interesting dynamic fight. So yeah, the addition of multiple enemies into a boss fight can provide some variety. I tend to be very resistant to bosses that are just like spawning infinite mobs. I really don't. I think that's kind of like a shorthand, or like a fuck, what's the term for it? Not like a cheat code, but it feels like a little bit of a ripoff, a little bit. Unless it's like really well implemented. But anyway, I'm getting off track.
In Dark Souls 1, there was 6 bosses with multiple enemies, 7 if we include the Sanctuary Guardians in the DLC. In Dark Souls 2, the number of bosses with multiple enemies jumps to 11, 12 if we include Dark Lurker, most of which feel as lazily designed as the Capra Demon encounter.
Okay, well, it's important to keep in mind as well, I have to go back and count exactly how many, but there are more bosses in Dark Souls 2 overall than there were in Dark Souls 1 or Demon Souls. So, I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing if there are more bosses with more enemies involved in them, but even if there are, if the argument that he's making is that more, like, greater numbers in boss fights equals bad inherently. I don't think he's literally saying that, but if he were saying that, then the proportion of solo bosses to multi-bosses is still probably about the same in Dark Souls 2 as it was in previous games. So I guess it's important to draw the distinction between raw numbers versus proportions, like ratios.
Rather than make the Freya fight difficult by giving her a challenging moveset, the designers just dropped some random spiders into the battle instead. The epitome of the
Yeah, I guess that was kind of what I was saying before. I feel inclined to defend poor Freya, but I do find setups like that pretty annoying. You know, I personally would have found the Freya fight more rewarding if or just like more interesting, I guess, if there was more of a focus on the relationship between myself and the boss as opposed to myself, the boss, and then all these annoying ass little spiders like Rom. I love Rom in in Bloodborne for her aesthetics, the arena, the music, the story, but having to deal with all of those like 30 plus fucking spiders every single time is just so annoying. But when you break down why that is, it's because they feel, to me anyway, they feel kind of cheap. They're not fun to fight. They're just like an impediment and they get in your way. If you ignore them, they will come back to bite you, literally and figuratively, and it'll just be unfun. It's just like a tedious slog. So I don't think the problem really is with having multiple enemies in the same boss fight. It's just with how they're implemented and whether or not they're implemented well. I will say, I don't think that the spiders in the Freya fight are like perfectly implemented, but I also think that, you know, in a spider themed area, the idea that a spider spawning more like little spiders is a pretty well established trope in gaming. It's something that you see in a lot of different games, like the idea of like a brood mother that can pour forth like little ones. I think you just have to find a way to make it fun. If Matthew kind of feels like, well, maybe they didn't succeed at that in Dark Souls 2, that's okay. Like, I won't try to argue much against that. I also don't really like this Belfry fight, Belfry Gargoyle fight all that much. It wasn't as painful as I thought it would be, but it feels super spammy. Like, the 2v1 or 2v however many people you brought with you back in part 1 felt fine. I understand and I can like appreciate the desire to escalate that and move it on to something like 3v1 or 4v1 or something like that, but it really just feels like if you don't I guess that's kind of like the Four Kings, right? If you just don't have enough damage, you don't keep up with them, then your skill in and of itself is probably not going to be enough to win you this fight, because you're just going to get totally fucking overwhelmed. And that can feel very frustrating. If you feel like, you know, you either do have enough damage output or you don't going into the fight, and if you don't, you're basically fucked. That's kind of how I feel about fights like this. Sorry says this was me, but I'm extremely arachnophobic. Oh, I didn't realize that. I hope that wasn't uncomfortable at all to watch that stuff. I don't exactly have like jump scare warnings or anything for spiders on screen. Or is it just like spiders in person, or do visual representations also bother you? Anyway, that sucks. Like, spiders are everywhere, so that must be like a constant nightmare to deal with.
This lazy mindset is the Belfry Gargoyles, a copy-pasted setup, except this time there can be more of them active at once.
It's not...
This all might have been fine, except it doesn't play to the series' strengths whatsoever. The mechanics of the Souls games are built for one-on-one engagements, thanks to its slow attack animations, which are uninterruptible once they start, and a lock-on camera which focuses heavily on a single foe.
Yeah, so this is something that I think would be worth diving into more. Domo has already talked about this pretty extensively and provided some good counter evidence or critique of this or whatever. I don't think it's fair to say that the Souls games are designed for one-on-one engagements, even like primarily or even as a focus. The lock-on camera isn't... The fact that it can only focus on one thing at a time doesn't mean that the whole system and the way that the game is made is intended for you to be fighting things in a like isolated one-on-one way at all times. It means that the game has provided you with the option to focus on one thing, on one particular target, and once you've designated that as your current target, to enable you to hit it more consistently by lining up with that target and keeping it in frame. But that doesn't mean that the game was just designed as like a series of one-on-one encounters. Going back to Demon Souls, but especially Dark Souls as well recently, there's plenty of situations where you'll be fighting single, you know, heavily armored enemies, but then also fighting groups of like trash mobs and like different encounters composed of different enemies of different classes. And this is true through all the games all the way up to Night Rain, right? How boring would it be if the entire game was just you walking up to a dude, dueling that dude, then walking up to the next one, then the next one, the next one? Like, that would be fucking boring. Encounter design would be extremely limited and extremely like asphyxiating, I guess, is one way to put it. And just realistically, you know, we could do this on stream at some point too. Playing through the Undead Parish as an example, which is something that Domo brings up, is it's immediately apparent that the game was designed for engagement with multiple enemies. You even get a couple of weapons early on in Dark Souls 1, like the halberd, for example, that say in their item description, this weapon is good at clearing out crowds. Like, if you use a strong attack, it will do a sweeping attack, which is good at clearing out mobs of enemies. However, you know, it can leave you vulnerable if you miss. So within the very first fucking area of Dark Souls 1, you are given very obvious, very easy to find means of dealing with large groups of enemies. There's also plenty of like pyromancies and stuff like that that can hit multiple enemies at the same time. The lock-on mechanic itself only lets you lock onto one person at a given time, but the lock-on mechanic is also designed to let you flick back and forth between different characters or different targets, which Matthew has already demonstrated. So, no, I don't agree with this at all. You can also turn the lock on, you can also toggle lock-on and off, so you don't actually have to be locked on. It's kind of like saying, and I'm sure, like, sorry, you'll probably have a strong reaction to this. It's kind of like saying the Zelda games are designed for one-on-one engagements, right? Like, basically, yeah, there are a lot of one-on-one fights in Zelda, but also pretty sure one of the first things you get in Ocarina of Time is an ability to charge your sword, which does a spinning slash around you and is useful for clearing out multiple enemies that could be surrounding you, right? Yeah, there are great one-on-one fights in that game, but the idea that like the game itself is designed to only like it specializes in one-on-one combat, and things that stray from one-on-one combat detract from the game feels really, really weird to me. So yeah. Saria then says, "Oh no, it's okay. I've gotten better with them in games, but when I was younger, I couldn't even beat the first dungeon in Twilight Princess because of the Skulltulas being in there. Oh no." Man, the Skulltula house in Ocarina must be like a fucking nightmare as well. That shit gave me nightmares when I was a kid, and I'm not even like, I like spiders, so yeah. Those things are so creepy too. Like the people that are like halfway transformed, still give me the heebie-jeebies. That's good. I'm glad they're getting a little easier. I wish I had further recommendations of how to make it more livable, but I don't know. Have you seen those the videos of the spiders that do like the little dances to each other to attract each other? It's actually really cute. There are some cuties, like cute spiders out there, but I mean, it's kind of like telling me, like I'm terrified of hippos. Not if I went to a zoo and I saw one, I wouldn't freak out or anything. But like watching footage of like a hippopotamus with its jaw unhinged, just like rushing towards something is one of the creepiest fucking visuals out there. The golden hippopotamus as well in Elden Ring is like super, super creepy. I don't know why. But there's no way that I'm gonna like ever be able to look into a hippopotamus's mouth and not be slightly terrified. And I know, like, oh yeah, was that little baby one that was in Thailand or whatnot? I'm probably getting that wrong, but like little baby Fung or something like that. Yeah, she's really adorable, really wonderful. She is a walking nightmare, and you cannot convince me otherwise. I'm sorry. She's a perfect baby angel, and also she will eat my soul if I get close to her. That's what my brain says when I see her. Oh. Seeing Lucas this way. Oh yeah. Cool. Alrighty.
Take the Prowling Magus fight, for example. If you want to kill one of the crawling undead littering this fight, your eyes need to be taken off the casters at the back in order to lock on. From there, you'll have 3 enemies shooting you at once, and since most actions aren't interruptible once they start, it's extremely difficult to know when a safe time is to start an attack animation without having vision of the enemy.
Well, let's see what happens here.
Extremely difficult to know when it will be taken off the casters at the...
Okay, so I just want to like see what happens over the course of this fight. So he starts off like switching his targeting reticle to different characters and trying to figure out which one to engage with. He starts off by then he correctly dodges the black incoming orb from the spellcaster, and then he zeroes in on this enemy that's sort of on the floor in the middle of a group of others.
Take the Prowling Magus.
He disengages, which is good. There's a very quick disengage, and then very quickly re-engages and reacquires a target that's close to his feet, which is great. So he's saying, okay, I've identified this target that's outside of the pack. Maybe I can pick it off. The issue that he does here, though, is that he attacks with his scimitar, and the first attack misses, and then the second attack hits. But unfortunately, like, that scimitar just doesn't have a moveset that is great at slashing things that's down on the ground. And honestly, at this point in the game, I feel like he probably should have noticed that and tried to do, like, I think the heavy attack has like an overhead slam, or pick up another weapon that could do something similar, right? That slash, that like right to left downward kind of slash, and then the flick of the wrist, is not really designed to handle enemies that are on the floor like this. So I think he could be potentially picking a weapon that is more to his advantage.
which focuses
Something that
heavily
we're
on
not
distinct-
hearing right now is the audio, and those spellcasters do actually emit a very distinctive bell chime cue. So that's another thing to look at. I understand that he's frustrated that he has focused on the thing on the ground and now his sight is off of the enemy in the back, but in this frame, before he locks onto the character who's on the ground, you can actually see the magus, or whatever the member of the congregation over here is, start to charge up his spell. Like, there's that very distinct golden glow, and if we were hearing the audio, we would also hear that sound play. So at that point, he, I think, has enough information to have that telegraphed to him. And he should know, okay, my scimitar is just not good at this particular thing. It's good at other things, right? But no one weapon in the game, for the most part, is going to do everything for you. Even the longsword, which is like the most dependable, versatile, like Swiss Army knife type thing, if you use it in a narrow corridor, for example, it's going to get stuck on the wall. So you have to like choose to use the thrusting moveset on it in certain times, right? So this is just not like a good choice over here.
Take the Prowling Magus fight.
And you can actually see his arm start to raise
and
up.
lock-on camera,
The
which focuses
priest.
heavily on a single foe.
See?
Take the
Cast
Prowling
arm
Magus
starts to raise up, and so he's already about to fire, and now you've chosen, or Matthew has chosen a target where he is focused on the ground. So I get that that's frustrating. I get that now you can't see where the thing is coming from, but there are actually plenty of opportunities for a player to recognize what went wrong here and to develop a strategy so that this doesn't happen, including like I think I see like a quiver with some poison arrows in here, including just like locking on to the congregation, the priests, keeping your distance, and then like poisoning them gradually, and then dealing with these guys while they're dead or poisoned. You having all these strategies. Me, sword didn't work, time for magic. Have you considered that you could put magic on sword, and then you could hit things with sword, and then if sword still doesn't hit good, the magic from the sword will like go on to the enemy, and then you wouldn't even have to cast the spell on the enemy. It just hit him with the magic sword. That's basically what I did for my first couple of playthroughs. Yeah. Honestly, you can use like soul arrow and the fire longsword to get you through the entire game. Just like you can use the saw cleaver and the blunderbuss to get you through the entire game in Bloodborne. Like, there are like ride or die Swiss Army knife type weapons in these games for sure. I brought some more water up here. We take a break in a second to... Oh, there it is. 1 second. I could be Unga Bunga too. I like those caveman type builds. That's what I've been doing in whatchamacallit, in Night Rain with the raider. Pick up big old chicken wings and smack them down on the enemy. Little seltzer here. Okay, let's keep going.
this fight, for example. If you want to kill one of the
Also, I don't think anybody who's pursuing a career in astrophysics can rightly call themselves an Unga Bunga. Maybe in gaming, I suppose.
crawling undead littering this fight, your eyes need to be taken off the casters at the back in order to lock on. From there, you'll have 3 enemies shooting you at once, and since most actions aren't interruptible once they start, it's extremely difficult to know when a safe time is to start an attack animation without having vision of the enemy.
Okay, well, sure, but again, let's just take a look at what's happening
You'll have
here.
3
So he makes a smart decision. He decides to heal up, and then he flanks around to the side and gets around them and closes in the distance. So that's all great. Now, at this point, however, he is kind of out of Estus, which is unfortunate. But as he's approaching the enemy, he hasn't like selected his healing. That's okay. But the thing to keep in mind about poison weapons is that when you apply a poison effect to your weapons, it changes the scaling, and unless you have a lot of dexterity and I don't know, and I think adaptability, which I don't know if he has, maybe he does, then the poison is actually going to debuff your weapon. Unless you're going up against an enemy where you are going to be attacking it for a long time and then like disengaging from it for a while, the poison buildup is just not going to take effect fast enough to make up for the debuff and physical damage that your weapon does. It really depends on your character overall, but in general, especially around this point in the game, that's probably going to be the case. Now, if I remember correctly, the scimitar also doesn't have great base damage. It just like its strength is in that it is a bleed inflicting weapon, but to build up bleed you have to hit the same target multiple times. So essentially he's given himself a weapon with reduced physical stats, and he's still playing on a high difficulty mode, and the weapon itself is like a specialized tool for dealing with enemies with very high health pools that you're going to be engaging for an extended period of time, and he's using it on like just sort of a fairly weak generic enemy. So he's putting himself at a very high disadvantage.
The enemy shooting you at once.
Okay, so I disagree with that. In all likelihood, not all three of them are going to be shooting him at once. Especially if you start attacking one of them, then they're not going to be, right? Like, this guy starts to charge up his holy attack or whatever, and then he stops because Matthew is actively hitting him. So he's only being attacked by the Prowling Magus at this point because he interrupted the other one's attack.
Interruptible once they start, it's extremely difficult to know when a safe time is to start an attack animation without having vision of the enemy.
I mean, not really, right? Like, not in my opinion. What I would have done here
three enemies shooting you
is I would have locked onto him, right? I would have gotten like 1, 2, or 3 hits in. One, 2, 3. And then the moment I see this guy over here who's fully within my vision start to raise up his hands, I know, okay, he's going to do like an attack as well. So disengage and then jump away. When he's done with his attack, come back in, get a couple more hits in, and then you'll be fine, right? So there are plenty of ways to handle the situation. The fact that you can't see everyone in the room at the same time doesn't really matter because he successfully lured away all the other enemies that were over here. So yeah, I don't really see the problem here.
Interruptible once they start, it's extremely difficult to know when a safe time is to start an attack animation without having vision of the enemy. The twin
well dodged there, right?
Dragon Riders are another example of this. You want to avoid attacks from both of them while periodically damaging one of them, but in order to do so you need to lock onto one and position yourself in such a way so you can see the other. This could have been mitigated by better audio cues on the bow as it's loaded and fired, but this is seriously overshadowed by the music. I found myself having to repetitively run up and down the arena so I could keep both of them on screen, feeling like I was fighting the controls more than the bosses themselves.
Okay, I want to look at this one more time.
Overshadowed by the music. I found myself
Okay, so he's firing an arrow.
Repetitively run up and down the arena so I could keep both of them on screen.
That would have been an opportunity to counterattack there.
Feeling like I was fighting the controls more
he
than the
does,
bosses
he uses
themselves.
that. I mean, like, I don't know, I feel like he was actually fighting the boss pretty well there. You know, he was reading the cues from the enemy, he dodged away, he used an opportunity for a counterattack. The thing is that, like, I guess I just have a different perspective about this boss fight, because when we played it, my first reaction was, okay, I need to get into cover, because that guy's going to hit me with those arrows. So I ran to where he was, and I figured, okay, I can, like, hang out under this ledge, and he won't be able to hit me as well, and then I'll be able to, you know, engage with his friend while he's trying to, you know, take pot shots at me. And then the enemy saw me doing that and then jumped down, and then all of a sudden it was a much easier to manage fight. But the idea that you would have to engage with somebody in a like a duel while somebody else is acting like a sniper, I think is an interesting setup for a boss fight. And I don't know, if he feels like the music is overshadowing the audio cue, that's fine. Like, that's a valid critique. I think that the audio balance could be better overall, but also I think it's, you know, reasonable that you could I think there are reasonable ways around that, right? Like, you can toggle off and on the lock on to help yourself like position around one of them, take pot shots, back off, like re-engage. There are ways to handle that situation. I don't think it's like the best boss fight in the world, but I also am not really seeing the same problem that he is.
During engagements where the camera works well, such as the Throne Watcher, Looking Glass Knight and Ruin Sentinel fights, the gameplay suffers heavily from the multi-boss setup. You need an extreme amount of patience to get through any of these bosses in a safe manner. The only strategy here is to wait for both enemies to exhaust their entire combo at the same time before doing a single attack on one of them and then going back into defensive.
It's interesting. When I heard him offer this critique, in my head, I was initially like, yeah, that's right. I remember that happening. But then we played the Throne Watcher and Defender fight recently, and we didn't have that experience, right? It just kind of worked out pretty well. So I wonder if they fixed that for Scholar. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt and assume that it was not as well refined in the original version of the game. But I guess what I found as well is that, you can kind of see a... yeah, sorry, I did talk about a bunch of this stuff in my playthrough. Yeah, I mentioned it. I just... hopefully this doesn't sound too redundant. I just wanted to make sure that I actually went and listened to the... about the... listen to the actual arguments that he was making in context, right? But yeah, we did totally go over it. And you can kind of see...
This is in a safe manner. The only strategy here is to wait
that, yeah, so like the Watcher, I think it is, in the background raised up her shield to kind of indicate that she was in a defensive position. And then it's sort of unfortunate that the Defender then, maybe I have their names mixed up, the Defender like started walking backwards towards her, and so now they happen to be in the same place and yeah, if you do actually start engaging with them at this point, you're probably going to get pummeled because this happens
before doing a single attack on one of them, and then
but then the Defender, or whatever, the White Road one started to flip backwards, and the other one kind of disengaged and went off to the side. So there's an opportunity there to, now that they're split up, to pursue them further.
Back into defensive.
Yeah, and now the other one is back in the defensive and like going back, and then this guy is coming forward, and you can engage with them. So yeah, it seems to me like my memory of the fight is different from his. The Watcher and the Defender would come together and attack together as a unit, but then they would split up, and then you'd have an opportunity to engage them one-on-one.
Dare to attack any of these bosses with more than a single hit at a time, or while one of them is still active, then you'll usually be punished immediately. The main challenge in most of these fights is not losing your cool and doing something risky before the end. So really the reason half of these fights are any difficult at all is because they're so boring you want them to end slightly quicker by seeing if you can maybe get a second attack off before rolling away again.
I will say again, like, I sort of sympathize with him. It seems like the enemies in this fight are separating for a few seconds and then coming together, and maybe the ratio of them being vulnerable to walled up is like 1 to 3 if I had to just put a random number on it. Like, they're definitely spending more time just kind of being highly defensive and reactive, and it's hard to find a great place to attack on the one hand. On the other hand, again, he's still like Covenant of Champions mode. He's still like kind of nerfing himself. There are ways that he could trade more effectively with them. And again, like this particular weapon, I'm not sure if it's the best for this setup. I want to sympathize with him, but I also am curious as to why he's not like experimenting more and trying to get around the enemies. I don't really see him flanking them a whole lot and trying to like poke away at them. But that being said, like, I also don't think having a boss fight that is against heavily armored folks that you have to be very cautious around, especially when it's right before the end of the game, that's wrong or anything. Maybe it's less fun, maybe it's a little less engaging. You have to feel like you have to spend a lot of time hanging around waiting, and that can be a little frustrating. But at the same time, this should feel tense. This should feel high stakes. It should feel like, this is one of the final challenges that you have before you beat the game. And these guys, their entire purpose, as their name kind of helps identify, is to protect this thing that you're trying to get at. So, I don't know. I think the critique here is understandable, but a little bit too narrow.
The variety in bosses is severely lacking, with far too many being oversized humanoid figures with giant weapons. They even
Okay, so this one I think is just objectively untrue. Let's let me pull something up here. And this was something that I was kind of looking forward to talking about. So, showing up? Yeah, okay. So let's look at the bosses here. Let's repeat what he said one more time.
often have to get a second attack off before rolling away again. The variety in bosses is severely lacking, with far too many being oversized humanoid figures with giant weapons. They even often have similar movesets, with a slow overhead attack, a gap closer, and a 2 or 3 hit swiping combo.
Sure. A lot of the heavy sword wielding bosses do have, a small, medium, and large sort of attack. Right? I'm not going to argue with that. But we talked about this a bit already on stream. Wow, if Extra Life has a lot of ads. 1 second. Okay. So let's talk about the bosses in the game overall. Last Giant, yeah, big slow weapon, but also has a cool innovation where he rips his arm off and attacks you. Also, early game boss doesn't really do a whole lot. That's totally fine. The Pursuer, sure, but the Pursuer also has like the unique kind of curse mechanic and the different attacks, like with the sword. Very simple, but also like recurring and early game boss. So I don't think that's should be held against it. But okay, we basically have 2 humanoid enemies. Executioner Chariot, very different. Looking Glass Knight, yes, humanoid with a big sword, but also has a ton of interesting mechanics in the boss fight. Skeleton Lords are different. Flexile Sentry is different. Lost Sinner, yep, big humanoid with a sword. However, we have unique mechanics with the lighting in the arena. So that's something that's a bit new. Even if you don't engage with the torches, she has the ability to break your lock on. She has like those jumping attacks where she disappears for a little while. Belfry Gargoyles definitely doesn't count. Ruin Sentinel sort of counts, but again, like when you fight all 3 of them, it's a trio boss fight with like verticality in the room. They have unique move sets and all that, so it's not just like one dude with a sword. The Rotten kind of is, but again, there's a lot of visual thematic difference going on there. Dukes Freya is not, Mitha is not. A lot going on in that boss fight, a lot of interesting, unique stuff. Royal Rat Vanguard is not, Authority is not, Scorpioness Najka is not, like she's different. Old Dragon Slayer, it's not a sword, but okay, we can just put him in as one if we want to. Smelter Demon, we can add. Old Iron King, no. Covetous Demon, no. Guardian Dragon, no. Dark Lurker, no. Vendrick, sure. Velstadt, at a stretch, but like he does have a big weapon. It's not a sword. He has other shit that he does too. Song, no. Dragon Rider, yes. Twin Dragon Rider, sure. Throne Watcher and Throne Defender, sure. Nashandra, not really. Aldia, no. Giant Lord, no. Ancient Dragon, no. So before we even get into any of this stuff, I would say like maybe 10% of the enemies in the game, of the boss enemies in the game, are like big humanoids with sword. If we're being strict, like we're being like very I don't know, critical. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So like 10 out of what? 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 out of like 40 or something. Okay, so 1 in 4 enemies in the game has a big sword and is a heavily armored humanoid that just like swings a sword in simple movements. Now, Chicken Nuggies, great. Now I want a Sprite. I can't think of Chicken Nuggets without thinking about Sprite for some reason. I don't know why. So now, go back to this.
Oversized humanoid figure slightly quicker by seeing if you can maybe get a second attack off before rolling away again. The variety in bosses is severely lacking, with far too many being oversized humanoid figures with giant weapons. They even often have similar movesets, with a slow overhead attack, a gap closer, and a 2 or 3 hit swiping combo. Attacks also lock on to...
Okay, yeah, so, oh, sorry, I thought he said vast majority. Definitely not the vast majority. It's like maybe 20 to 25%. I just think that's objectively wrong. If he were to say, my overall experience with the boss fights is very samey, and I think that they're all kind of boring. Okay, that's fine. But just factually speaking, there is an big lot of um of variety here. Not just in the encounter, like the bosses themselves, but also the environment and the gimmicks behind them, like the water that rises up in the Flexile Sentry's room and the two enemies fused together concept, the spawning additional enemies in the Looking Glass Knight, the Executioner's Chariot room. Skeleton Lords are a great example, actually, of spawning all kinds of additional mobs. Royal Rat Vanguard also fits that mold. The poison in the Baneful Queen's arena, the Smelter Demon's like literal heat mechanic. Covetous Demon is kind of like almost a joke boss in that he's pretty easy and a little bit pathetic, but in terms of the way that he flops around and stuff, but also just, interesting lore there. Vendrick is kind of a riff on Gwyn. Giant Lord is a more, I guess, straight up fight, but that's fine, right? Like, he's just like this king that you're fighting. I know Dark Lurker is pretty unique. Dark Lurker is all kind of crazy shit. So yeah, there's a lot of variety here. A lot of variety here. You could still come to the conclusion that they're all bad. Like, you could just decide or like feel like you don't like them all. That's okay. You're allowed to. But I think saying that there's no boss variety or whatever is just not true.
To an unnecessary degree, far more than in previous installments where enemies usually had movesets with their own weaknesses and strengths. When a boss goes to do an overhead attack, it will usually track the player up until the very last moment before impact, even if this means the boss has to spin around like they're standing on top of a record player.
Yeah, I think we saw some of that. The worst offenders are those turtle knights that will just literally spin around 360 degrees at incredibly fast speeds or whatever. And that is annoying and immersion breaking, I think. I think you'll actually get to these in a second. I didn't find it as big of a problem as he did, but like, I get where he's coming from.
I can only speak for myself, but I was hoping to see less of this kind of stuff, not more. Bosses should have movesets which don't rely on tracking the player in such a cheap, simplistic way, and it's notable that big bosses in Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1 usually lack this kind of lock-on, or only used it during part of the wind-up in order to compensate for their powerful moves.
Yeah, I think that's fair, honestly.
This was one of the things that set the previous Souls games apart from other titles, and gave the combat a better sense of fairness. It was also less problematic in those games since the boss designs were more varied. After my 6th fight with a giant armored enemy with a giant weapon and the same basic moveset, I was getting pretty bored.
Okay, again, like, if somebody's telling me that they were bored with the game and they felt like they were basically having the same combat encounter, if that was a game that I was designing and that was feedback that I got from the players, it would be really dumb of me to say, no, stupid, just have more fun. You're not having fun with it, right? I would be a pretty thick-headed designer if I took that approach to player feedback. I will say, though, that, again, like, I know this is not really the point, but he's using the same scimitar with poison against the Smelter Demon. I can't remember if the Smelter Demon is actually vulnerable to poison. It might be good, but this does not read to me as engaging with the weaknesses of this particular enemy for what it's worth. But again, like, just trying to be fair as fair as possible and going through here, I just don't think it's accurate or fair to say that there's not a lot of boss variety. There's a ton of different shit going on here, from quote-unquote joke or gimmick fights to tutorial fights to very sort of slow and tedious fights to fast-paced, energetic fights. I don't know. All these different things have different abilities and different gimmicks and stuff like that. Sure, the Last Giant and the Pursuer and the Lost Sinner and the Giant Lord and Nashandra all have big weapons with big sweeps. But I mean, like, I don't know. I feel like it's pretty myopic to just ignore all the other shit that's going on during those boss fights.
Regular enemy attacks do this excessive
This is the one
as well, even when it's completely unnecessary. Take the turtle armored enemies for instance. Despite their massive suit of armor, they'll follow the player 360 degrees on any of their attacks. The sad thing is these enemies have a built-in countermeasure for any player who gets behind them, so there's no excuse for them to be constantly facing the player.
Oh, yeah. That was the other thing. I really don't like that phrasing of no excuse. I think to try and be a little ambassadorial, I think he's just saying that, like, this winds up being very frustrating and he doesn't agree that with the overall design choice. But I think his perspective seems to be that hang on, I don't
The
want to...
challenge here should have been to try staying to the side of the enemy without getting too close to the front or the back. Instead, they just require the same tactics as every other enemy in the game.
Yeah, there's a little bit more going on there, though. Something that he didn't really showcase in this particular instance. He didn't really demonstrate how the mace itself does like a little area of effect shockwave thing that will kind of slow your character down. And also that this is the first really heavily armored enemy that you've encountered in the game. And so it's kind of teaching you about different resistances and encouraging you to try different items, different types of attacks as well. I think saying that the fight should have been designed in such a way as to make it so that the task or whatever, the ask of you as a player is to just be on the side of the enemy, because that makes it feel a little bit more Zelda-y. Like, not that that's an insult at all, it's not, but you know, then you're basically just looking for the weak point as opposed to trying to find figure out how to engage the enemy overall. I remember playing Ocarina of Time after beating Dark Souls for the first time and going in the Goma fight and like slashing or something like that, and slashing away at the enemy's like legs or something like that, and then being completely frustrated and confused as to why I wasn't dealing damage to it until I remembered, oh, you have to just hit the glowing weak point, right? There is a specific task that you have to do here, and you only have a short window in which to perform that task. Something that I appreciated about the Souls games is that as long as the enemy wasn't shielded or barriered up or something like that, hitting them at all would always do at least a little bit of damage. And there were various ways for you to kind of get around them. What the Turtle Knight is doing is it's punishing you for relying too heavily on like backstabs. So something that you could do in Dark Souls 1 is that those big heavily armored like black knights with the big halberds and swords and stuff are very terrifying, but if you can just get around to behind them and backstab them, it can be a way to kind of defeat them pretty cheesily. If you try that with these Turtle Knights, they're going to squish you, which we just saw. So you can actually use that strategy of staying to the side and poking at them, but you don't have to be that like cheesy about it. Instead, the test, or what you're being trained on, I guess, is to figure out when the enemy is vulnerable after a strike and to time your counter strike better. And I think that just reducing that to, oh, we just have to hit him on the side, to me that loses like an opportunity for instruction there. No, he hasn't talked about the piggies. Sorry, I don't know why. I don't know how he could get this far in his video and not mention a single piggy. There's so many good piggies. There's the three little ones that we have in Majula. There's the one that shows you how to get the pickaxe. There's the porcine shield, little pig shield, and no mention of piggies whatsoever. I don't know what this fucking guy's thinking, honestly. Yeah, it's basically a real fight. That's a good way to look at it. Yep, I agree with that. It just feels like more organic and more alive, I guess. Alright, let's go.
It's not just bosses that suffer from the mentality that more enemies somehow makes the gameplay better. The regular enemy placements fall into this trap as well. There's far more groups in Dark Souls 2 which automatically aggro...
I'm sorry.
...fall into this trap. Mentality that more enemies somehow makes the gameplay better. The regular enemy placements fall into this trap as well.
Something is weird about that. So he's in the Covenant of Nar Alma, the blood, I forget what they're called, but like the Invasion Covenant. He's got the Invasion item equipped for duels and stuff like that. He's late in the game. I think he has like something that's increasing his attack power. He probably has the Ring of Blades on. How is he only doing 297 damage with a backstab? Hang on one sec.
There's far more groups in play better. The regular enemy placements fall into this trap as well.
That's quite strange.
There's far more groups in Dark Souls 2 which automatically aggro together.
See, now I have to go and test it.
Clumps.
He upgraded his weapon, right?
forcing the player to fight against
Because like my +10 axe was like taking out those guys in like 2 or 3 hits, and that was from the front.
2 or 3 difficult enemies at a time. Dark Souls 1 had a lot of mobs as well, but they
Oh, here, yeah, I totally forgot about this shit.
against 2 or 3 difficult enemies at a time. Dark Souls 1 had a lot of mobs as well, but they were balanced around this idea. Mob enemies would have low health, lack a shield, or do comparatively little damage, sometimes all 3. Large or heavily armoured enemies in Dark Souls 1 were usually placed in positions where the player could fight them one-on-one.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about, right? With the backstab.
Even
And this is like right before the final boss.
right up until the very last area, because that's what meshed best with the core mechanics. Dark Souls 2 just haphazardly places massive enemies all over the place.
Yeah, so I don't agree with that. I don't agree that placing 2 knights, like we were talking, the example that he had before, that placing 2 knights in this big open room doesn't seem like haphazard placement to me, especially since I think, if I remember from a recent playthrough, these knights are the ones that can kind of come back to life. Like, they start off as stone, and then if you run past them, they wake up. So basically, if you're careful about the way that you play through this area, then you don't have to fight both of them at the same time. You can fight them once, but or fight them one-on-one, excuse me. But then you also have this large room, and in this room, you can maneuver so that you don't have to fight both of them at the same time. I think the issue here is that, yeah, it's tricky as a melee fighter in particular to deal with both of these guys at the same time because they both have these big ass shields and your weapons are just going to bounce off of them. Particularly the scimitar is not really good for getting through shields. A strength based weapon that can do more poise damage. It wasn't called poise in this game, was it? Maybe it was. Or stance damage or whatever the term for it is. And let you actually break poise and then get through that shield, including like actually using the shield break attack, which is something that I don't do often, but it's there. Is definitely a possibility that I don't think is being considered here. So no, I don't see this placement as haphazard at all. Yes, it's true that so I'm glad that he's bringing this up because it kind of serves as evidence against his previous point that the Souls series like doesn't play nicely with multiple enemies simultaneously. This is an area where you get fucking swarmed, and it's not just here, right? There's a bunch of places throughout the parish where you get an undead burg rather, where you get accosted by whole bunches of enemies all at once. And as long as you have a weapon that does some sort of a sweeping, like a lateral attack, you're fine for the most part. You just have to kind of pace yourself. But at the same time, this encounter also features, I don't think we see it here, but there's also like that channeler, that blue sort of dancing dude with the metallic looking robe that is buffing all these enemies up. So there is an armored, more powerful enemy amidst the swarm, but you have to figure out how to deal with the swarm to get to the stronger, more fortified enemy. I think that's good encounter design. I think it's varied. I think it pushes you to try to develop meaningful tactics, as does this situation here. So I guess the question we should ask is, does the combat situation that you've been put in encourage you to experiment and to problem solve and to puzzle solve and to, I don't know, have a challenge in that regard? I think this does. So it doesn't feel haphazard to me at all. Saria says, honestly, aren't there places like this in Dark Souls 3? Maybe I'm misremembering what I think there are. Yeah, there are all kinds of places in Dark Souls 3 that have one-on-one enemy encounters, but also groups, also duos. Sometimes they're like long gauntlets with actually in Dark Souls 3, when you're kind of going through the final castle, there are enemies that are excuse me, wow, that came out of nowhere. There are enemies that are heavily armored that show up together in like patrolling squads of 2 or 3 at a time. And sometimes those squads clash with other squads. So yeah, there definitely are. You're right.
Dark Souls 1 had a lot of mobs as well, but they were balanced around this idea. Mob enemies would have low health, lack a shield, or do comparatively little damage, sometimes all 3. Large or heavily armoured enemies in Dark Souls 1 were usually placed in positions where the player could fight them one-on-one, even right up until the very last area, because that's what meshed best with the core mechanics. Dark Souls 2 just happened.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit insulting, honestly, to the design of the game to say that like the core mechanics are only like adequate or even best for one-on-one engagements. Like the developers clearly put a lot of effort into designing multiple types and classes and varietals of combat encounter to work well with a variety of different builds and weapons and keep things interesting. So you'd basically be suggesting that the developers designed a whole bunch of different encounter types in all 3 or 4, if you include Demon Souls, of the Souls games, but then also shipped a system that was inadequate for dealing with it, right? Like, it's a weird kind of cognitive dissonance, I think.
Haphazardly places massive enemies all over the place.
Oh yeah, again, these 2 like primordial knights or whatever they're called are not haphazardly placed. This is right before the entrance to the castle. This is kind of a big deal. This is a pivotal moment in the game. They were both placed here deliberately. Now they were also both covered like petrified. So I forget, you might actually be able to just approach one and like kite him away, or maybe both of them unpetrify at the same time. But you also have like this large arena back here. This one in particular though, like again, narratively speaking, this is the king's castle. It's being defended by large kind of imposing, terrifying warriors. This is narratively how it's supposed to be. Yeah, I don't see this as being an issue at all, and it doesn't seem haphazard to me at all.
Dealing with multiple strong enemies like this comes across as a hassle rather than an interesting fight, which encourages players to use cheap tactics instead of playing fair.
I guess so. I mean, if you consider using a bow to pick off enemies at range to be cheap tactics, you think bows are cheap, then I suppose, but you can pick off one of them and then get close to another with a sword. You can use a variety of different, like, you could try to use a polearm, for example, or you could use other types of ranged weapons or consumables or whatever. You could try to flank them, to run around them, to pull them. Like, there's a lot of different things you can do.
In most cases, the AI is still easily abusable by backing off into a corridor and firing at range.
I will say that is something that we talked about before. The whole like AI spatial restrictions thing is a really difficult problem to solve, and I don't think that they did a perfect job in Dark Souls 2 at all. It is immersion breaking and unfortunate when you're having a duel with a character and then they say, "Oh, you know what? You're boring now," and just decide to fuck off and return to their original spot. Yeah, I empathize because it's hard to make that work. There's always going to be, you know, the risk for players to exploit that, and so I don't fault Matthew here for being adverse to that or calling that out. I just also am a little bit more sympathetic towards it because, yeah, it's a really tough problem to solve.
This occurs so much, I'm left wondering whether the designers thought this made for a good gameplay scenario somehow. As a melee
I do think it does, but okay.
character, you can pull back until the enemies start walking back to their starting point, leaving only one of them to deal with. And as a ranged character, you can stand back and abuse the AI's inability to move into certain areas. This gets taken to ridiculous heights later in the game. If you ask me, King Vendrick should have just defended his kingdom by building more doorways.
Yeah, I mean, like, I kind of understand the criticism there too. I think we saw that they fixed this in Scholar by replacing this area with more like draconic knights, and those knights as well won't or not replacing the area, replacing the enemies in this area. They're no longer these like big Drake Keeper knights or whatever they are. They're the smaller kind of like dragon armor set knights, and I think they can follow you back through the door, which definitely makes things more tense. But also, if you just sort of act respectful as you're going through this shrine, you don't have to fight most of them. And the one that you do fight is actually further up the stairs, so it like takes longer for you to go back down, and he chases you further, so you're more likely to just stay up there and keep on fighting against him. So yeah, I think this is a bit of an issue with the placement of the doors. I don't think it really happens all that much though. Like, he found this example is pretty bad. Not gonna argue against that, but I personally, in like my playthrough recently, I don't think this was something that was that much of an issue throughout the game. This is just one big chunky guy that got stuck in a door, you know? Let's see. Sorry says, I hate this thought of a fair fight. You're fighting to live in universe. Why would you want? Why would you want to fair fight? What are you, Goku? Yeah, I mean, I feel like tough but fair, I think, is a worthy aspiration or a worthy goal. Like in terms of designing encounters, you do want to feel like you have a chance. Like the game isn't just dicking you over, right? Like, I mean, I don't know. It depends on what you want, but there's this mod for Elden Ring where I think when you start the game, you start off like with Scarlet Rot or something like that, or basically anytime an enemy hits you, you have a % chance of getting Scarlet Rot and poisoned and blood lost and frostbit. So you could be doing perfectly well, and then the game just decides, actually, fuck you, right? And so the game is actually literally unfair to you. And to me, some people really like that. Some people are a big fan of that mod. I personally, like, no criticism of the people, like, the work that they did to make the mod. I'm sure it's great, but I would find that experience totally fucking miserable because it would feel unfair, it would feel cheap, and I need to feel like I have a decent shot at overcoming the obstacle. If you look at something like Melania, though, or what's a boss fight that I really like the Scatter Tree Avatar, I genuinely feel like that fight was fair. It was also really hard, and it was unbalanced. It was asymmetrical. My character overall didn't do as much damage and didn't have as much health and didn't have as big of abilities as the other person did. But what I had that the character didn't, that the Shadow Tree Avatar didn't have in universe, was the benefit of like practice and returning to the fight over and over again and varying my build and stuff like that. So even if my stats were vastly inferior, overall I still think I had opportunities, and so the fight didn't feel unfair even though it was narratively unfair, if that made sense. Saria says, oh no, I agree there, but saying I don't want to fight cheap feels really weird because it's your experience, so just don't do that. But why would you not take any advantage in the game you have? Right, yeah. So I think to kind of play devil's advocate a little bit here, if I feel like, and I was playing, I can't remember the game I was playing recently, but like there was this game I was playing that was pretty decently challenging. I was having fun with it, and then I figured out that if you did this one move, it just basically killed everything in one hit. And I don't think it was like a developer oversight, but like if you charge that enemy, you can do this big sweeping attack and then everything would die. And then I tried to not use that because it was just trivializing every single encounter and it was making it not fun. But every time I went back to engaging with the regular sort of like move sets and whatever, it would always be in the back of my head like, hey, you could just press this button and win. And then eventually I got tired of when I would get frustrated or when I would start to have less fun, excuse me, with a given fight, I would then just like fall back on that, and it did kind of ruin it for me. So I think once you figure out that you can technically kill anything, or like a vast majority of the enemies in the game with a poison bow without even getting close to them, a lot of the thrill and the satisfaction of that comes with overcoming obstacles in the Souls games is when you feel like you are at a disadvantage, but you overcome that advantage. And if you subvert that and feel like you're always with the advantage, then it's not as satisfying to overcome the adversity. So it's a very difficult kind of tightrope to walk. Of course, you have to be careful with that rhetoric, though, because then you can use that to justify, like, well, I beat the game with my bare hands, and that was an exponentially higher level of adversity that I conquered compared to you with your spells and your swords and your like rinky-dinky little healing items. I'm like, oh, okay, well, fuck you. Go fuck yourself. Like, not really. You just everybody has to figure out where that balance is for themselves, and it's hard, and it's there's no like right answer, in my opinion. And as a developer, you have this difficult challenge where you need to try to find a game that somehow acts like a Rorschach test and serves as like this abstract canvas for everybody, as many different people as possible, to have a meaningful experience, despite the fact that their skill level and their patience level and their personal interests will vary widely. It's sort of an impossible task, and I think there's a lesson in there about choosing a demographic and figuring out how you're going to cater to that demographic as best as possible, instead of trying to just appeal to as many people, as wide an audience as possible, cast a wide net as possible. So yeah, it's tricky. It's very difficult. But I think that Dark Souls succeeded by finding its niche, so to speak. A white rabbit has appeared. Hey, how's it going, White Rabbit? Hope you're having a good evening. Hey, do you guys know what minute means? I keep hearing it. Minutes, like minute? Like, minute means like little or tiny, small. Or do you mean minuet? That would be like a piece of music? Or, oh no, I see what you're doing. Yeah, no. Okay, yeah, you almost got me with that. Good job. Oh, minus. Yeah, minus. That's when you take numbers and you take one number away from another number. Reduces things. It's it's an easy mistake to make. So it's an easy thing to get confused about. But shit, I wish you'd stopped by a stream a couple of months ago, because we were reacting to SOCON. There's a whole bunch of interesting stuff that came out of SOCON this year, and I've never managed to go. So like my late New Year's resolution is to check out SOCON next year, because man, there's always something interesting there. Couldn't go last year because I got Ligma. Let's continue.
In the previous Souls games, part of the challenge sometimes was getting back to a boss after failing to kill them. If the level didn't open a shortcut or there wasn't a nearby bonfire, you had to traverse the level again and then make it to the boss in good enough condition to kill it. This was one of the things that drew people to the series in the first place, because it was challenging but still very fair. Now look at this path to Velstadt in Dark Souls 2.
Oh yeah.
It's a single corridor littered with no less than 7 heavily armoured enemies. There's no sense of progress slowly making your way down a corridor by fighting the same enemy 7 times, so you're far more likely to just run through it. The same goes for the hallway leading up to the Looking Glass Knight.
Okay, yeah. So I think we talked about this on on our playthrough recently, and I genuinely felt like I was really trying to find a way to love that corridor up to Velstadt. And I think I understand what they were going for, right? It was a sort of thing where you were supposed to notice that the bell ringing dude was causing the ghosts to spawn, and then you were supposed to go back and silence him. But you had to be careful not to ring the bell yourself. And it was supposed to, I think, reward inquisitiveness and resourcefulness and carefulness, care or whatever, caution. And then you were supposed to have some enemies defending Velstadt, but ultimately that was more of a narrative thing, and the real challenge was just solving the environmental puzzle. But then we did that, and then we kept on getting mobbed over and over again, and it got very, very frustrating. So it's weird. I think Fromsoft have been engaged in this weird sort of like rubber banding over the years with the concept of boss runbacks, where Demon Souls honestly probably had some of the best ones, in that if you consider the boss as a part of the environment, and the real boss fight is the level itself plus the boss, it's not the level itself and then the boss. You know, that started to peter out as we transitioned into Dark Souls 2, and now in Elden Ring it's like all but gone. You know, the boss run backs are fast when they're there, and a lot of times for the hardest boss fights like Malenia and Consort Radahn, they're just right outside the boss room. There's no rush back at all. And so unfortunately, if you like this sort of thing, we have lost the art of the integrated boss into the level sort of setup, which is a little bit unfortunate. However, there are still moments like this in Dark Souls 2, and I think the one that stood out to me the most was the one leading from the Sinner's Rise to the Lost Sinner. It's not super long, it doesn't feel super unfair, but it does feel like if you aren't paying attention, you will kind of get smoked. You do have to pay attention to where you're going. You can learn routing that makes the process easier. You can also learn how to, like, you can find that key that opens up some of the pathways and makes your life easier. You can summon Lucatiel. So it feels challenging, but it also feels integrated, and it also feels like a part of the whole experience. This corridor here doesn't really feel all that bad to me. I mean, I think it makes sense to have some additional guards before you get into the Looking Glass Knight fight. It feels thematically appropriate. They're not too difficult. They're just kind of there to like raise the tempo, so to speak, between you leaving the bonfire and getting to the Looking Glass Knight. As for the one to Velstadt, yeah, the only defense I have for this is to just say that, like, there's a lot of it makes sense for the king and Velstadt to be well defended, narratively speaking, but I mean, like, it was just a huge pain in the ass, right? Like, if I'm remembering that correctly. So yeah, I definitely see his concern here.
There's no point putting a bonfire next to a single hallway with enemies most players are simply going to run past. They might as well have just placed the fog door there and saved everyone the hassle.
I will disagree with the there's no point. I mean, I think there is a point. Like I said, it's to ramp up the tension before the boss fight itself, and to just give you another thing to, like one more hazard to make sure that you're not just disengaging with the environment. I think there's a point to it, but you're also allowed to, like, not like that. That's okay.
There's similar setups for the Lost Sinner, the Ancient Dragon, and part of the run for the Executioner's Chariot. This isn't level design. It's tedious, lazy, and frustrating.
Okay, so again, so this is where I sort of have a bit of a mixed opinion. If you find it to be tedious and frustrating, that's totally fine, because that's your experience of it, and that's legit. I don't think it's lazy, and it's also just factually wrong and bizarre to say that this is not level design when you're playing a level in a video game. I mean, like, I get what he's saying. Like, he's being a bit hyperbolic. He's basically just saying, like, he doesn't think that this particular level was designed in a compelling and intricate and interesting, engaging way. He thinks it's bad level design. But saying it's not level design is wrong and dumb, because it is a designed level, just objectively. And disagreeing with the design approach is fine, but saying that it is lazy and that it isn't what it is by definition, to me, is pretty disrespectful and kind of misses the point. I understand for this particular space, when it's just a corridor with some enemies, and especially the Velstadt one, that it doesn't feel like it's a designed space. It just feels like a prefab that somebody threw in there and threw some enemies. But there was a decision that was made. You could disagree with it, that's fine, but to imply that it was almost like a random, like, junk thing that happened, I don't think that's particularly fair. And I do think that there's a case to be made for why these particular, like, horse, like, equine knights or whatever they're called, are present. Like, have a little bit more curiosity. Why are these particular knights outside this particular boss arena? What is their connection? What's the lore? What's the story? Why are they defending them? Why do I have to fight them? Instead of just being like, there's no reason for this, focus on trying to explore what reasons there might be, and then if you disagree with those, that's fine. And I would avoid using the term lazy as well, because that implies a sort of malicious apathy on behalf of the people making these spaces, which to me, that's just always going to be unfair. But anyway. Sorry. Oh, Sorry says, hello, White Rabbit. Are you late? Are you looking for the Red Queen? Nice. I like the reference. Yeah, lazy in air quotes. That's something that, like, I get it. To be fair, I don't want to, like, create this caricature of Matthewmatosis sitting there being like, Matthewmatosis, literally think that From Software people are actually lazy. They show up, they only work 2 hours, and then they go home, and then they don't care, right? He's using the term hyperbolically, poetically, or whatever you want to call it, to describe his feelings about this, and that's okay. But it's also sort of not okay, because if that language today continues to be used, like fucking Feeble King's constant refrain of the B team at From Software or whatever else, I think it is pretty shitty to imply that just because you didn't like the way that something turned out, that the people making it have, like, this element of moral bankruptcy or whatever, bad work ethic, however you want to phrase it. It's kind of shitty.
Despite having a much more heavy-handed and long-winded introductory sequence, the plot of Dark Souls 2 plays itself out far more poorly than in the first game. I want to quickly make a distinction though. There's a difference between plot and lore. Lore is the backstory of the world and all that kind of stuff, but the plot is what's happening right now, what the main character is doing, why they're doing it, and so on.
Sure. Like plot and lore are different terms that refer to different things. It's fine to draw a distinction between that. It's also important to know, though, that Dark Souls 2 and the other Souls games as well, they tell their story through the lore. Like the story and the lore are not like completely disconnected. It's not like you play through the game and then you go to the game's website or whatever and you read a story that was written, or you listen to the like I don't know if you guys played the Callisto Protocol, but like they had like a whole podcast series with a side narrative that they released alongside the game. It's not like that, right? It's like the game is telling you its story with a very small amount of like cutscenes and expository dialogue and stuff like that. Most of its story is told in environmental storytelling, item descriptions, things that you notice about character designs and things like that, right? It's all diegetic for the most part, or the vast majority of it is diegetic, and it's interwoven with the game's like history and present, and it's all kind of like one woven tapestry, if you let me get a little poetic about it. So I don't think drawing a distinction between story and lore really works the same way in the Souls games as it might in others.
First, I'm going to summarize the plot in Dark Souls. Last chance to turn back if you want to avoid spoilers.
Spoilers.
The intro video to Dark Souls 1 establishes all the major players, which will become important later on, giving us an idea of what makes them special and what their role was in shaping the world the way it is. When we start the game proper, we're told about the curse of the undead, and our character has been imprisoned for carrying the curse.
Now, that's seems fine. If I'm going to be like super nitpicky or whatever, there's probably some characters and major players that aren't really mentioned, like Velka, for example, but that's okay. I get what he's saying.
Then, after some indeterminate amount of time, Oscar breaks the player out of their cell. Shortly after, we find Oscar mortally wounded, and he asks us to fulfill the prophecy of the undead by ringing the 2 bells of awakening. When we arrive in Lordran, that's our goal. Once
Yep, okay.
the 2 bells are rung, we have no idea what to do next, but this awakens Frampt, who says we need the Lord Vessel to complete the prophecy, after which he explains he's seeking a successor for Gwyn so we can link the fire. Linking the fire seems like a good idea, so we probably want to go with that. This carries us to the end of the game where we succeed Gwyn. There's more to it than that, but that's the gist, especially for a first-time player.
Okay, I actually want to go to his next point. We'll probably come back and listen to that. I'll refrain from commenting too much right now, although I do have a lot to say about it. Suffice to say that I don't think that that's like an okay description of the very, very broad brushstrokes of Dark Souls 1, but there is a lot that is left out, and really, that's sort of a back-of-the-box description, right? That doesn't really go into detail as to why linking the fire, quote-unquote, seems like a good idea, or if it actually is a good idea, what the meaning of the prophecy actually is, who Oscar is, and it doesn't, I guess, more to the point, there's a lot that happens to your, I guess I am going to talk about it now, there's a lot that happens to your character over the course of the story that counts as plot, that has nothing to do with any of those, like, big characters. Like, for example, encountering Lautrec, or I can never remember his name, the guy, like Laurentius, the guy who gives you pyromancy, or coming across the Lord Vessel and talking to, quote-unquote, Guinevere, and or encountering Gwyndolin and what happens there, going through the your encounter with Andre and his your experience going through Sen's Fortress and the Iron Golem and getting flown to Anor Londo, etc., right? Going down and figuring out what Nito's up to and how Pinwheel got the Rite of Kindling and how that affects your journey. The Gaping Dragon, like all of those things, those aren't just lore. Those aren't just like incidental things that don't matter. There is actively a story that's being told with everything your character does. Yeah, it's not being told in the same way of like having a cutscene over here that explains what's happening, or something like Diablo comes to mind, where you have these big act transitions and big explanations as to where the major players are going. Like Mephisto's over here doing this, and like Duriel like is in the sand house, whatever, right? It's not quite so on the nose, but all of those things happening, like the Sisters of Chaos, right? Ceaseless Discharge and the Centipede Demon and Quelaag and Quelana or Quelan, like those characters are doing things. They interact with you. They have a story that is actively taking place and evolving, and you are intersecting with it. So really, I don't like this as a description of Dark Souls story overall. I think it is at best the cliff notes. I didn't play the game before class, now I need to turn this into my teacher. Quick, somebody, tell me what Dark Souls is about. It's not wrong, right? It's not a terrible job explaining what the overall major beats are in the story, but that is still not really an adequate description of the story. And it's worth kind of taking a moment to explain this, because then he's going to start talking about the Dark Souls 2 story and how it compares, and you'll see kind of why, hopefully, I kind of went on this little tangent. Saria says, I agree, sometimes plot and lore overlap. It's not always a clear line. Yeah, it's not always a specific distinction, right? It can be, but to me, even the stuff where, like, you're just picking up audio logs or notes that characters left and you're reviewing them later, that stuff is still part of the story. It happened in the past, and you're yeah, let me copy your homework, Dark Souls edition. Yes. The real Dark Souls was the real challenge of Dark Souls is that it keeps you up doing these all-nighters, and then you rush to class the next day not having done your homework. And now the final boss is scrambling for cliff notes or spark notes or whatever, summary of what you were supposed to be doing last night when you were stuck in Blighttown. The true Dark Souls begins here. Yeah, it's an active part of the storytelling, and that's honestly, like, that's part of what makes Dark Souls so special, is the way that it does that.
The intro video to Dark Souls 2 shows the main character dropping into some kind of whirlpool, because the old lady tells us we're cursed, and the only hope of a cure is to go to Drangleic for some reason. She actually says we'll have no idea why we're going to do any of the stuff we're about to do. Upon arrival, we go to a shed, and some more old ladies laugh at us. Then, after arriving in Majula, the maiden in green tells us to find the king. It's not explained why we might want to do this, but I suppose we can just imagine he has some kind of cure. On a hunch that the king has a cure, even though the entire kingdom is crawling with undead, we go and kill 4 powerful demons to open the Shrine of Winter. This allows us to get to Drangleic Castle, where the queen tells us to find the king. When we find him, he's gone hollow, so then, after some exploring, we go and talk to a dragon for some reason, and the dragon tells us to go into the memory of the giants for some reason, and this annoys the queen for some reason, so we kill her and take the throne for some reason. The pacing of Dark Souls 1 wasn't great after the Lord Vessel.
Yeah, so there's a whole lot to say there, but I guess the first thing that I want to address is the for some reason. Like, let me apply that same kind of phrasing and that same kind of attitude to Dark Souls 1, right? Like, Dark Souls, and I'll summarize the plot of Dark Souls 1 doing the same thing. So going back to Dark Souls 1, there are these important players, and they have a fight with the dragons and whatnot, and then your character wakes up in a cell, and then some knight gives us a key for some reason, and then we fight some big demon for some reason, and then he tells us we're supposed to fulfill this prophecy for some reason, so a bird picks us up for some reason, and then we're in Lordran, and then we have to go fight this stinky dragon for some reason, we see this lady who's a spider for some reason, etc., right? Like, my problem with this is that it's just totally incurious and checked out and bored in terms of a way of engaging with a story. Now, I think what he's going to get to is that he personally finds the way that the story is told to be, like, too complicated and too obfuscated and unnecessary. The lore is too nebulous and, like, difficult to parse out and understand, and so it's a pain in the ass. Dark Souls 1, okay, I got it. Big fire guy have big cool kingdom, fight dragon, kill dragon. Fire guy, not so much strong anymore, fall apart. Kingdom fall, daughter leave, big fight, big sad. Dead guy has some power. Dragon guy has some power. Old spider ladies have some power. Last person I'm forgetting about also has some power as well. Gotta go get that power, gotta make a cool new kingdom. I'm gonna do that. I'm a cool guy. Kill a king, make new kingdom. Oop, I'm on fire. Right? Like, on the surface, a lot of that is much easier to understand than oh, this depressed king is walking around in circles, and I guess fuck, I'll go talk to this dragon who gives me like a little orb of, I guess, a cloud, and then fuck, there's like a dead giant type thing with a hole in its head, and now I'm in someone's dream. What is happening? Help me. Right? Like there's obviously like more weirdness and nebulousness to Dark Souls 2 story, but that's also, at least for me, a big part of the charm. These stories are designed to be a bit ambiguous, a bit open-ended, and that is actually the part of the point of Dark Souls 1 as well. Yes, there is this sort of hyper obvious story about dragons fighting kings and fire and magic and stuff like that, but really there's a whole lot more going on about, like, well, what does it mean to be chosen to fulfill a prophecy? Is fulfilling a prophecy actually a good thing? Are the gods that designed the prophecy actually worth following? Like, what happens to a kingdom when somebody tries to hold on to his reign long after his time has passed? Are the symbols that we're surrounded with that are kind of explaining these legends of glorious times to be taken seriously or trusted? And then what do you do when you find out that all the gods abandoned you? Like, how do you continue to build hope up for yourself? Is there even any point to hope? What is darkness? Is darkness really all that bad? After all, darkness can't exist without light, and vice versa. So what even are these forces that we are fighting against or being drawn towards? There's all those kinds of themes in Dark Souls 1. Even starting to talk about like the nature of the human soul and like human emotion and yearning and desire, all that stuff, and willpower as well is a big one. All that stuff is in Dark Souls 1. It's just, I guess, a little bit further removed from the plot. You have to go looking for it a little bit more kind of out of your way. Whereas Dark Souls 2, it's like front and center. Dark Souls 1 maybe asks you like, oh, wouldn't it be kind of bad if it turns out that this goddess that you're talking to doesn't actually exist? Oh, you left. Okay, bye. Go save the world. Whereas Dark Souls 2 is like, oh yeah, that king you've been looking for the entire game that was supposed to save you and save the kingdom, look at him. Look at the most pathetic thing you've ever seen in your life. Now what the fuck are you going to do? Right? So, but both of them have really interesting and really compelling themes that are woven in with the plot and the lore. And I think this description, basically, not only is it incurious and kind of rude and dismissive towards Dark Souls 2, but it also winds up pigeonholing Dark Souls 1 and describing it in a way that seems to take triumph, so to speak, in the simplicity of the overarching narrative, instead of really like reveling in all of the intricacies and the details of the things that are happening within that narrative, which is the whole fucking point. Like, so I don't know, I find this whole section really weird and baffling, and also I don't like it. Thank you very much. Sorry, says, isn't the point of DS2 that time is going all wobbly and weird? Yeah, I don't even want to... Okay, 1 second. So, there is the one topic that I'm kind of resistant to in terms of Dark Souls lore. This is just my own bias. I don't even know if there's any good reason for it. But I don't know much about and don't really know how to talk about the time travel stuff. Because... you meet a character called Solaire. You're probably familiar with him, right? In Dark Souls 1. And he has a line that goes something along the lines of, oh, do you see those like heroes flittering in and out? Time in Lordran is convoluted, and we can see heroes from the past kind of crossing into our worlds. And when those crossovers happen, you know, we can assist each other and work together with jolly cooperation, something like that. So he's trying to give us a diegetic explanation for how the summoning system works, and it's basically like there are other, I guess you could say, versions of reality, but probably a better way to put it is there are other outcome. Yeah, I don't see, it gets really messy. Let's just say that like there are other warriors from other places in time where things might have turned out different, and their power, their willpower, their soul or whatever can resonate with yours across that gap in time. And I guess, like, I don't know, make like a little wormhole that they can come through, and then you can go fight a boss together. Something like that, right? I don't know if it's ever explained more than that. There is an item description for, that I've talked about before, one of my favorites, for the repair spell, which uses golden light. And the description is something that's like, light is time. And so the idea being that, like, you're not actually fixing your weapon, you're actually just making if you break your sword, you're not repairing it and like reforging it, you're just sending it back in time to a time where it didn't suck. It's essentially what you're doing. And so there is some like weird, like timelines, but I don't know if it's like literal branching timelines. It's complicated. I'm not really good with time travel stuff, but basically the theory that I came up with before is that since time and the world around you can be shaped, so space and time can be shaped by desire and willpower. And if you have enough souls, then you can manifest that desire and willpower basically through like kind of creation magic, and warp your world and your perspective around according to like what you want, what you're yearning for. And other people, is the thing, can do this too. So hypothetically, if you go out and you kill somebody and you get a powerful soul, but somebody else with a powerful willpower was like, I want to see myself as the hero, and they pour their willpower into that desire, they could potentially also, paradoxically, go and kill that same boss and get that same soul. And then, they basically just exist in a world that's overlapping with yours. But it's sort of less like they've created a branching timeline like in Marvel Universe and Loki or whatever, and more just that like they are existing simultaneously with you, superimposed with you and overlapping with you, but also paradoxically somehow removed, because those two things can't actually exist, right? Like one guy kills the boss, you guy kills on his own, you kill the boss on his own. Those two things are mutually exclusive, and yet they still exist because both of you want them to exist, and you're powerful enough to manifest your desire. It's really weird, but that's the best explanation that I can come up with. We also talked about Artorias, right? So like in the lore of Dark Souls, the idea is that like this town called Ulasil is overrun by the Abyss, and Artorias goes into the Abyss and he defeats Manus, the father of the Abyss, like the source of the corruption. And then when you go there, you go back into the past, and you are told before you go in that that's what Artorias is doing, that's what he's done, and that's why he's a hero. And then you go there, and then Artorias is actually like covered up by the Abyss, and you wind up killing him and killing Manus, and then becoming the hero that everybody said Artorias was. But in order to do that, for you to be able to do that in the first place, the world needed to survive, i.e. not get swallowed up by the Abyss. So in order for you to save to kill Artorias and redeem him, you would have had to have already done that, which you haven't done yet, except you have. It's and then it all goes like wibbly wobbly and weird. Yeah, something like that. Sorry says, oh, this actually has me thinking of something, but I'll have to check my class notes to be sure. Oh, cool. Yeah. Definitely interested to see if you can make heads or tails of this. This is the one thing that I kind of like. I'll admit it's not my best, like my strong suit, but when people start talking about like the timeline stuff in Dark Souls, my eyes just glaze over. But also, really the thing that I find irritating is, or not even irritating, it's just like it kind of makes it difficult to have a conversation about this stuff sometimes, is that what fucking Solaire says is that the flow, okay, I might have misspoken before, but the flow of time in Lordran is convoluted. The flow of time in Lordran is convoluted. And so what he's saying is that rather than time just going forward, because of all of these like weird powerful manifestations and all that, the timeline can like twist and warp around on itself and wind up creating like these weird like nexuses and crossing points and all that. And so people from the past and the future or whatever are all kind of converging together. And in Ulasil, like you get pulled into the past by Manus, and then you also see somebody there called Marvelous Chester who looks like he got pulled out of fucking Bloodborne. So apparently you can get pulled in from different time periods and different different time periods as well. So that there is definitely some weirdness going on there, but Solaire seems to be explaining it less in terms of like branching parallel timelines and more about like the history of the world itself has now folded and knotted and kind of become this weird tangled mess. And at every single point where a tangle occurs, like the thread of yarn is like tangled in on itself, then things can cross over. Like I was supposed to be in this time in history, but oops, I like skipped over there and now I'm in that point in history for a little while. It's something like that, right? It's like weird ball of paradoxes, like a history that's constantly rewriting itself, basically. Damn it, now I might actually kind of be into it.
But it did a lot more with a lot less when it came to its plot. Its introductory video set up the world and the major players very efficiently. I also think people underestimate how important Oscar is in Dark Souls. He's the one who kicks off the events of the entire game. Personally, I was never interested in the prophecy, but I wanted to honor the dying request of the guy who freed me, so it worked out either way.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, personally, I am pretty biased against prophecy narratives unless there's something interesting that goes along with it. I just, not that you can't do it, but there's so many games and stories that just wind up with your character being the chosen one. Honestly, like I'm still kind of going back and forth on this, but like the Naruto being the child of prophecy or whatever is like one of the worst parts of the series to me. I just don't care. It was so much cooler to me if he was just this little shitty scruffy kid who nobody believed in, and he made himself into something as an underdog. Like, yeah, he had the demon fox in him and it was a massive power buff, so he had an advantage over others. And like, for the record, like I can't stand that Plague of Carpus video. I like Swag's response to it, but at the same time, yeah, he goes from being like this dumb bullshit little kid who's actually very talented, but just nobody sees that yet, and he learns how to overcome his, I guess, disadvantages and then take advantage of the talent that he does has in the form of Kurama, to then, oh well, he's actually like the son of one of the like most powerful and deadly shinobi ever. And also his mother was part of this like clan of people who had some of the most amazing sealing jutsu and the most amazing stamina, and like she could like literally restrain the nine tails with her chakra chains. And then also he had the chakra attached to him of the child of an Otsutsuki, which is a super powerful alien from another fucking planet, and thus was directly descended from the Sage of Six Paths, who's like the like basically shinobi Jesus, and was prophesied to save the world. I'm like, shut the fuck up. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be dismissive or rude. Like, Kishimoto wanted to tell that story, and I respect that. And he also, it's not as simple as I said. Like, there's a lot more to it than that. But over the course of the series, he does get further and further away from being like this scrappy little kid to being somebody who was selected by Anime Jesus to become Anime Jesus 2.0. And it's a little disappointing. I kind of like, that's kind of why I like the Souls games, is that there are these narratives about stinky know-nothing doo-doo heads who got like yanked out of a fucking coffin in a forgotten cemetery, somehow figuring out a way to fix the world, you know?
This is all the plot a Souls game needs. It seems to me...
Well, that pisses... that, no, I disagree with that. I actually tried to like think this out loud earlier. I don't know how to convince somebody that this is wrong, because technically speaking, nobody needs anything ever. In other words, no game really needs a story. The only thing any game needs is like a control interface, a win or a loss condition, and some sort of a feedback loop. But even all of that is debatable. I'm sure you could make a game that has no controls if you were super smart and creative. I'm sure you can make a game that has like no loop. It's just like pointless. There's no reward, whatever, right? So what even is a game? What even is anything, right? I guess what I'm trying to say here, though, is like, I don't think that you can really say that about Dark Souls 1 or Dark Souls 2, that it didn't need a story. The most charitable response that I can give to that is, if you play through the story and you play through the game and you don't engage with the story, and a lack of story doesn't bother you at all, it doesn't detract from your experience, and you actually like the simplicity of not having to deal with the story, that is okay. Like, you're allowed to have that perspective, and I think that's maybe what he's trying to say. But if you're trying to say that, like, the game itself shouldn't have a story that is beyond a certain level of complexity, because then it gets in the way or detracts from the experience, no. I think that the lore and the narrative that Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, etc., weave is very deliberately and necessarily a part of the experience. Every single boss, every single enemy, every single encounter, every single room, for the most part, that you go through in the series has a reason for being there, and you need to understand like the characters that are involved in that and their reasons, their motivations, in order to really feel the emotional weight and the impact of what's going on there. Yes, you can go through the doors of Pharos and not know anything about who Pharos was, and not care about why that space is where it is, and still be like, ooh, pretty, ooh, big dog, smack, ooh, talking rat, and still have a good time. But if you ignore all of that stuff, you're missing out on a whole lot. If you don't even like raise an eyebrow and have any curiosity as to who Pharos was, well, then you're not going to understand who the Rotten is. And if you don't understand who the Rotten is, well, the Rotten is one of the 4 major players, right? That the analogs to the 4 like god type figures in Dark Souls 1, then you're not going to understand what the gutter is, you're not going to understand what the Black Gulch is, etc., or you're not like going to fully understand it. So the thing is, I don't know how to convince somebody who is just like doesn't care about the story that the game will be better if you do, because if you're just not into the narrative, then what the like, okay, fine, that's up to you, I guess. But then I think what he's going to say is that Dark Souls 2 is a lesser game for having a more intricate story or something like that. And then that's when it's like, okay, you're affecting your enjoyment of, and you're potentially coloring other folks' enjoyment of this work of art by trying to argue that because the art has a story associated with it, it's worse than it would be without it. And that to me is like ridiculous.
That the new directors confuse the obtuse nature of the lore in Demon Souls and Dark Souls with the plot.
Oh yeah, also, I just want to point out that at one point back here, I think he said like the Emerald Maiden. We talked to the Emerald Maiden who says like we should go to the king, but we don't really know why. If you talk to the Emerald Maiden within her first like set of dialogue, she explains exactly why. So, yep.
Those NPCs are often useful. Like it was only the main storyline, which was a step backwards.
Yeah, and right now she's talking about it. So.
This is all the plot a Souls game needs. It seems to me that the new directors confuse the obtuse nature of the lore in Demon Souls and Dark Souls with the plot. The story was never complex in the previous Souls games, whereas the one in Dark Souls 2 was poorly presented and unnecessarily convoluted, which left me without a strong sense of purpose for most of the experience.
Yeah, I mean, like, I understand that the story is a little bit more vague and more nebulous and stuff like that. Unnecessarily convoluted? No, it is necessarily convoluted. Like, the developers had a specific story that they wanted to tell. It was a story that dealt with complex and heady themes, and it was told in a way where, actually, you know, I think he kind of defeats his own argument a little bit by the fact that he was able to say, well, no, I'm kind of puzzling it out in my head, but no, I'll retract that for now. I'll just say that I don't know. I don't see what the point of this is. Like, I don't see why. Like, I really genuinely am trying to figure it out, and I'm trying to be fair. But let me go back and hear what you said.
It was never complex in the previous Souls games, whereas the
okay, hang on.
Game needs. It seems to me that the new directors confuse the obtuse nature of the lore in Demon Souls and Dark Souls with the plot. The story was never complex in the previous Souls games, where
I mean, like, I disagree with that. I think that the story was complex in Dark Souls 1. There was a lot of complexity and intricacy to it. Yes, you can summarize it very simply, but I could also summarize the plot of Dark Souls 2 very simply as well, right? Like, your character is losing their mind due to a curse. They're told of a magical land that could potentially save them. They go to this land, but immediately lose their sense of self. They meet a maiden who tells them, if you want to have a chance at restoring yourself, you need to see the king. The king is very powerful, but not just that. The king actually looked into the essence of what it means to have a soul, what the soul is. The king figured out what it means to be a person. So if anybody can help you figure out how to fix your person problems, it's the king. However, to meet the king, you're going to need powerful souls. So go find some. Oh, you found some. Cool. Go see the king. Oh, you see the king was broken? See, he failed in his mission. But maybe if you go higher than the king, then you can actually succeed in his mission too. Go talk to the dragon, because dragons are cooler than kings. Oh, cool. You talk to the dragon? The dragon wants you to go look into the history of the past. If you understand the history, maybe you can solve the present. Oh, you did that and you confronted a great evil? Okay, well now you have become the new king because you have understandings of the past, the present, and the future, and you can solve the problems, but to do so, you're going to need to face your final test and defeat the final enemy. Only then will you have become a true, real, actual king. Oh, cool, you did that. Oh, cool, you are the king now. Right? Like, that's not really all that complicated. It's a little bit more complicated than, like, the Gwyn and the prophecy stuff. Sure. It's not quite as straightforward or derivative, I guess. But, for one, it's still pretty straightforward. Cure curse, find king, king broke, find dragon, become king. Now you king, you can fix thing, right? That's basically it. But also, what an incredible disservice and like disrespect to the narrative that's there to say, fuck, it's too complicated. Fuck, no. Like, this should be about the dragon and the king, and you got to kill the king and then fulfill the prophecy. That's all we need. That's all I need. I don't know. I don't know how to convince somebody to care about the story. I don't know how to convince somebody that, like, a more intricate or interesting story is like a good thing. But I also want to be fair and be like, yeah, there can, like, it's not invalid, it's not crazy, it's not stupid to say, look, I couldn't engage with this because the story was just fucking bananas and I couldn't deal with it. Death Stranding. Maybe you should do a Death Stranding stream at some point because that game is like unhinged. And I have very complicated feelings about it. But I just like could not be fucked to figure out what the hell was going on in that game. I have some theories, but the thing is, I was looking forward to that game so much for so many years. Like, I loved the imagery, I loved the trailers. I just found it like haunting and compelling. And Metal Gear Solid 5 was like, I loved that game. I spent like hundreds of hours on that game. And so when Kojima announced that Stranding was coming out, I was fucking pumped. And then it came out and I just like could not fucking deal with the story. It was so convoluted. There was so much going on. It was so like full of itself. It insisted upon itself. Okay. It insisted upon itself. And I just couldn't do it. And like, oh, fucking Conan O'Brien showed up wearing an otter hat. Great. Okay, fine, Kojima. Like, I'll read the log. I'll try to understand it. Oh, it's literally a Wikipedia page on, like, the Egyptian concepts of Ha and Ka. I'm not fucking doing this, right? So, you know, like, some people picked that up and they fucking loved it. They adored it, and it was their favorite game, and that's great. And I feel like I probably feel the way about Death Stranding as Matthew feels about Dark Souls 2. So I can understand and I can get it. And I want to be fair, and I don't want to be like, well, this guy's an idiot, he doesn't understand story, right? Like, that's not what I'm trying to do. But at the same time, I think it would be a little audacious for me to say that Kojima, like, I don't know, that his games don't need a story either. Like, they don't need a complicated story. Because if you take all of that dumb shit out, I'm exaggerating, I do think there's a lot of brilliance in his work. But if you take all of the sort of convoluted stuff out, well, then you just have a story about a guy delivering the mail and shooting at ink monsters. So, I don't know. I don't think the game necessarily gets better if you just take out all the stuff in there that's complicated, you know? Anyway, Saria says this is exactly how Kingdom Hearts 2 fans are to the rest of the fandom. They'll constantly say you shouldn't pay attention to the story after that game, even though it's not complicated. There's just a lot of info. Yeah, that's another series that, like, have you seen, like, Video Game Donkey's video, where he breaks down the lore of the Metal Gear Solid series? I realized at a certain point when I got to Metal Gear 3 or whatever, that even though I loved the gameplay of 5, I was just not going to understand the story. Like, and I just sort of checked my brain at the door, and I just played the game, right? And that's fine. That is okay to do. And, like, Matthew is, not that he needs my fucking permission, but he's allowed to do that. I just kind of resent the idea. It feels like he's kind of excluding the possibility that there is actually a compelling and interesting story, and that we should try to go looking for it and try to understand it. And more that he came up against the story, he said, this is complex, I don't need this here, I don't want it here, so I'm not even going to try to understand what it's saying, and then I'm going to hold it against the game because it, like, had the audacity to put this shit in front of my face in the first place. And if I'm interpreting him correctly, hopefully that's not a straw man, but if I'm interpreting his position correctly, then I think that's just kind of a huge, like, missed opportunity to engage with the game. So I think this is probably a good stopping point. Going about 3 hours now, getting a little late. This was fun. I think I'm gonna keep. Oh shit! I'm sorry, Loha. I was just about to say goodbye when you showed up. Thank you for stopping by. Either way, I watched that Donkey DK video you mentioned before, and it changed my life. Which one are you talking about? The the dancing, the Donkey Kong animated TV show. You say it changed your life. I hope it changed your life for the better. That shit gave me nightmares. Our love is stronger than a golden banana, after all. The show, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's there is some magic there. There is some genuinely special, delightful magic on display. Like, early CGI was crazy. And I'm really glad that shit exists. Donkey is such a delight, by the way. He I've started watching his stuff back when he was doing League of Legends, and he was basically the only thing helping me maintain my sanity with League of Legends for a long time. And then, like, seeing how he's maintained for over a decade to be consistently funny and interesting and insightful has been, like, really inspiring. Plus, you know, he's his own video game publisher now. And the fucking success of Animal Well was tremendous. It was really great to see. I haven't played the Star of Providence yet, but that looks really cool as well. So, sorry for the crappy timing, Loha, if you just showed up, but I appreciate you stopping by. I'm glad that you got something out of that video. I think this was a lot of fun. I think I'm going to keep going with this for the next couple of weeks on the Thursday streams. This Sunday, I'm going to talk about anti-skepticism in Naruto. So I went back and I don't know why I do this to myself, but I listened to a bunch of Noodle's old debates, and now I'm kind of catching up on the most recent ones with Virtue and Troy and Six, and I think I understand, like, the what he's upset about with regards to like, oh, people are being, like, just being skeptical and just being reductionist or whatever, but also, like, there's this larger trend of anti-skepticism that I'd like to discuss, because it kind of sucks, to say the least, and I just want to vent about it for a little bit. So that'll be this Sunday, and then that's it. I think that's it. Okay, thank you so much, everybody, for stopping by. I hope you have a great night, and I'll see you in a few days.